Welcome back Naruto fans. I'm back again with another fun and exciting video. Today's video is, what if Naruto quit ANBU at age 10 and threw his bloody mask at the Hokage? Before we start the video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Your support motivates me to create more fantastic Naruto videos for you. So without wasting any more time, let's jump straight into the video. Prologue. The door opened silently. You wanted something, Hokage-sama. The third looked up from his paperwork momentarily and a smile played on his lips. In front of him stood one of his most prized shinobi, an ANBU member to be exact, the youngest ANBU member since Itachi, the prodigy himself. Sit down, no need for formalities. He remembered with a pang of remorse when the boy had called him old man. Those days were far too long ago now. The chubby cheeks had become harsher, more refined whilst the brow had become stony and unyielding. The boy could hardly be called a machine, nor could he be called a child. Laying his pen to the desk, he was silently thankful for the interruption from paperwork. It would be the death of him someday. There always seemed to be a pile or three on his desk nowadays. Sarutobi leant back in his chair and turned his gaze back to the porcelain mask of the ANBU sat in the chair opposite him. Take the mask off. You're not on duty. There was a brief flicker of all too human hesitation. Before the porcelain mask was removed and laid down carefully on the desk, a sound barely made. Calm, blue eyes stared calculatingly back at him, blonde sun-kissed hair framing his face. Once upon a time the boy would have grinning and fidgeting, declaring his dream to be the best ninja ever, no longer. The boy sat quietly, like a man 3 or 4 times his age. This wasn't to say that this boy was unsocial and cold-hearted, he was just professional. Sarutobi had seen him smile. Look at you, so young and yet already one the most powerful shinobi in Fire Country. He thought to himself, torn between regret and pride as he thumbed an edge of paperwork. Naruto, you are only 10 years old and are already at a point in power that is considered Hokage level. This was acknowledged with a small smile. If anyone else had been in the room, they would have thought that the teenager didn't care. But Hiruzen Sarutobi saw that telltale flash of childish abandon behind the cool blue eyes. It had taken the council some time to realize how powerful the demon had become. There had been several moments where the old man had thought they were going to execute Naruto on the spot, that he was too dangerous to live. It had only been after Naruto had saved Homura and Koharu from an assassination attempt did they see how much Naruto could help their village, that it would be a mistake to dispose of such a valuable commodity. Time and again you have proven yourself, and I have seen with my own eyes that you are a natural leader. He had been taught by the best two, himself and Jiraiya, when his perverted student had managed to tear himself away from his research, but he had always wished that Tsunade would be able to teach him too. It was highly doubtful she would ever return, not after what happened to Nawaki and Dan. He wouldn't be surprised if she never thought about returning to Konoha again. The council has decided that you would be the best candidate for the place of the 5th Hokage. The boy simply nodded, although Sarutobi noticed the air of desperation that seemed to cloud over his face. He had wanted more of reaction, a smile, a punch to the air. Even dancing on the table might have been accepted. A memory stirred from a time before Naruto was born, when he had told Minato about his candidacy for the place of 4th Hokage. The third shuddered. He never wanted that to happen. Ever. Again. It had been mentally scarring. However, continued the third, coming back to his senses, that promotion is hardly immediate. There is important training to be done before then. There is one more mission to complete before your apprenticeship of sorts can be made official. There's an entourage of shinobi traveling from Hidden Grass to Hidden Waterfall. Our spy in Grass thinks that they may be plotting to kill the daimyo of Fire. Any particular reason? Naruto asked, leaning back in his chair and staring at the ceiling before remarking coolly, it's not every day you plan to kill the daimyo. At this particular moment we're not sure, but they are suspected to be from Iwagakure. I see. The blonde murmured, glancing down at the floor before asking. How many? 30? Possibly more. The third took out a small stack of papers. This is the intelligence report our spy sent back. It has rough details of almost everyone in the entourage. Naruto took the small stack from the Hokage script, flicking through the papers absent-mindedly, before standing. Is that everything, Hokage-sama? For this mission you will be traveling with Kakashi and his squad. The third watched as Naruto's face light up. He and Kakashi had always gotten along, since the day they had met. I thought Kakashi-senpai was a sensei now. So he still calls him senpai. How amusing. Kakashi had been the one that taught Naruto the ropes of ANBU, and the boy still hadn't forgotten. He's on leave for the moment. Sarutobi sighed wearily, glancing in distaste at a particular mission report. C rank and still a fail. Kakashi's team were close to being disbanded. His team just came back from a rough mission. Naruto shrugged nonchalantly. All of them are tough. Then the boy picked up his mask. And he was gone. 3 masked figures were stood in the shadows of the giant gates of Konoha. Code name Kitsune leant against the wall, checking through the mission's provisions for the upcoming journey. The second was obviously a woman. Her light blonde hair swept up out of the way behind her head. Loose strands a more common occurrence than she had hoped. Code name Tora. The third was by far the tallest, with dark black hair that shone blue in the moonlight and framed the ANBU mask. He stood perfectly still. Code name Yama. Kitsune was tapping his foot agitatedly. He'll be here soon, Kitsune-sama, she began, more than a hint of playful sarcasm in her lilting, silky voice. Please, don't call me that, Tora-chan. Tora smiled underneath her tiger mask. She considered Naruto to be like the little brother she never had after she had lost her friend Dinu in an incident with a missing nin on a mission they had taken together. Her team knew that she still blamed herself for his death. It was just in her nature, no matter what ranks he had attained. Yama still didn't move, but Kitsune didn't really care. Yama was usually the silent type, not going out of his way to make conversation. Tora cared, and jabbed him in the ribs. Come on, Yama-kun, lighten up, will ya? She teased, ruffling his hair with a gloved hand as Yama flinched. Before the man had a chance to reach boiling point, a brief rush of air signaled the entrance of a 4th masked figure into the group. Yo! A gloved hand was raised in a sluggish greeting. You're late. Tora yelled, ready to pounce on the last member of the squad in her fury, but held back by the stoic Yama, his hair still ruffled and drooping over the porcelain horns of his mask. Well, you see, there was the little old woman, Anne. The 4th member started, rubbing his silver-haired head with one of his hands. The fist that swung by his face narrowly missed, although his hair swayed slightly in the breeze as it sailed past. Tora's grin couldn't be seen, but it was painfully obvious when she sang out. Don't lie, Ainu-chan. Don't you know what they do to bad dogs? Kitsune raised a slim eyebrow as he sensed a familiar chakra signal making its way towards the gate. The Hokage was really making a personal visit? The man was still wearing the robes of office, but kept to the shadow of the alleyway. It was hardly the place for the Hokage to be seen so late at night. I wouldn't have expected you to come see us off on such a mission, Naruto remarked, standing at attention. Well, it is your last mission as ANBU Black Ops. I should at least wave you off. Naruto couldn't help but wince at those words. His last mission? Would that really just be it? His dreams ruined for the sake of protecting the hidden village? After a rush of air, only the Hokage was left, but the feeling of uneasiness still stayed. Nothing would go wrong. This was Konoha's piercing wind he was thinking about here, the most accomplished ANBU Konoha had ever seen. The cool dawn finally arrived and the squad stopped for a moment. Perched high above the floor on ancient branches, the permeating smell of rotting undergrowth strong in their nostrils. Kitsune had gone ahead to scout the surrounding area. Are we there yet? Tora whined, looping lazily around a branch in her insatiable boredom. No. Yama all but growled, having been asked that question every 10 minutes for the past 2 hours. Tora swung round, landing nimbly on her feet next to the annoyed man, who was seconds away from throttling her. It's still a day away. Ainu pointed out, relaxing against the worn tree trunk, seemingly asleep, but still keeping an eye out for Kitsune. Lies. Tora spat, although her tone was kept childish rather than acidic, nudging Yama playfully before lating out on a branch in the sun. Yama shook his head. ANBU were supposed to be the elite of their village. Then why was almost everyone insane? There was no warning for the hand that suddenly found its way to his shoulder and he started forward, barely avoiding a fall from the branch on which he was perched. Kitsune stood, mask peeled back from his face in an expression of bemused confusion, resting casually as if he had been sat there the whole time. The team knew each other personally. The masks were simply for the enemy now. Kitsune liked to think it was better this way. Anything? Ainu asked, beginning to stand, although he already knew the answer if Naruto had removed his mask. But the blonde still shook his head. There was nothing I could find. Kitsune shrugged, rolling and shoulder as it was stiff before allowing his arms to drop to his sides. There aren't any patrols and they haven't set any traps. So they haven't even noticed we're here yet. Yama chuckled quietly. That gives us the advantage. Indeed, that it does. Everybody ready to go? Kitsune asked, checking their surroundings one last time before replacing the mask. We just need to get in and out as quickly as possible. ANBU instructed his squad with a grave tone. We want no survivors who could possibly continue in their attempts to kill or overthrow the daimyo of Fire Country. We want no trace that it was Konoha either. Tora, it's your job to clean up the crime scene and plant the evidence. There was a tense silence that even kunai couldn't cut. So we go all out. Tora whispered seriously, her voice laced with regret. ANBU nodded. The mission details say we spare nobody. Kitsune stared at the floor. Konoha had received word of mission success a couple of days ago. The Hokage, Homura and Koharu were gathered in the main office, waiting for the returning shinobi. It was dark, although the Hokage had lit a candle and placed it upon the table, the still flame catching everyone's attention. The flame flickered once then went out and they started back as they were plunged into near darkness. A figure stood between them all, the moonlight glistening against the blood and the stench of decay strong in their nostrils. The ANBU mask was stained burgundy, the dried flakes peeling away to reveal bone white. The Hokage knew something was wrong just by the way Naruto was stood. Where was their rest of the team? Had the mission really been a success? Is everything the Hokage started, concerned by the blonde's behavior. Sarutobi only just managed to catch the mask before it cracked against his temple, the remnants of rust blood staining the edges of his ceremonial robes and palms. Naruto's eyes blazed wildly and his hair stood on end like he'd been struck by lightning. The boy's shoulders shuddered with barely contained rage. The room suddenly seemed too heavy to breathe. I quit, Naruto growled, ruby red flecks dotting his eyes momentarily before he continued between gritted teeth. I can't take the role of Hokage. Then the boy was gone, leaving nothing but the tang of rotting flesh, blood stains on the floorboards and the chipped ANBU mask in the hands of Sarutobi. He walked away, muttered the Hokage, barely managing to hold himself in check. The old man sat still for a long moment, his thumb rubbing the roughed edges of the mask before his head dropped to his chest. He suddenly felt very old, and very afraid. It took less than 5 minutes for the remaining team members to arrive at the office. What happened, Kakashi? I heard the mission was a success. Sarutobi growled, his clawed hands still clutching at the mask as if somehow it would erase the past events. It was Hokage-sama. But something happened. The man began, clearly as perturbed as his leader. There was a confrontation. We're not sure on the details. Tora spoke. He wouldn't tell us anything. He didn't even speak to us the whole way back. Sarutobi mentally cursed. How did nobody know what was wrong? They saw the boy almost daily. Did he say something to you, Hokage-sama? Anything? Yama asked, also removing his mask. Hiruzen sighed wearily, allowing himself to feel human for a moment as he held his weary head in weathered hands. Unless I didn't hear him correctly, he just resigned from being a shinobi. Tora gasped, her deep brown eyes widening in surprise and fear. No. Permission to leave, Hokage-sama. Granted, she left in a burst of speed with Yama soon after her, without even bothering to ask the Hokage for permission to leave. Kakashi stood still, watching them run off and disappear around a corner. With his mask resting on the side of his head, he stared forlornly at the Hokage monument. I'm sorry, Minato-sensei. I couldn't even keep that promise for you. It was then that Sarutobi Hiruzen decided to leave for the night, for it would be a long day and Hokages were not supposed to be human. 2 years later, he sat upright, sweat drenching his entire body and running in rivulets between his shoulder blades. His breathing was erratic and irrational. It was an ephemeral nightmare of the past and could no longer hurt him, but he allowed himself the selfish pleasure of being afraid. It was only then he realized how cold it was in his room, that he could see his misty breath in the air for a few seconds before it disappeared. The sweat on his skin began to prickle and he shivered. Outside it was still dark. The moonlight cast an eerie light on the building outside his murky bedroom window. Everything so still and quiet. Not a sound was heard except his fitfully beating heart. He breathed in and out slowly, and rubbed his eyes. It was too late to go back to sleep now. He was wide awake. Naruto sighed and slipped out of his warm bed. He hissed as his feet came into contact with the cold wooden floor, lifting his feet as though the temperature hurt as he ran across his room to the cupboard where he kept his clothes. The stairs creaked as he made his way down to the ground floor. One of the floorboards was broken, and he had never got around to fixing it. It wasn't like he didn't have the time. He just never had the incentive to fix the broken board. In fact, most of his house was in a similar state. The only door that still worked creaked ominously whenever he used it and the kitchen sink never seemed to drain. He was pretty sure there was a window pane in one of the abandoned rooms upstairs that had been smashed in a genin training exercise, but his house was avoided like a plague by the academy children. He hoped the stories about his dilapidated buildings were suitably scary to keep even the Chunin out of the way. The kitchen was as messy as ever, and a lonely cupboard door hung from rusted hinges. He'd fix it later. Empty instant ramen cups covered most of the counters. Dirty cups and dishes littered the sink, and the kitchen cupboards were open, revealing the little food that was left, mostly instant. Cleaning was another thing he could never get around to do. Naruto selected out one of the few instant ramen cups in the cupboard nearest to him, filled it with boiling water and set it on the side, waiting until the piping hot water had cooked the ramen all the way through. He washed one of the forks, as the cutlery drawer was empty with its contents spread across various rooms in the house. 3 minutes passed. The fork was inserted into the boiling ramen, and the 12-year-old sat down in the only free space there was in the kitchen and living area, an old brown armchair. It was the only thing he bothered to keep clean anymore. Next to it stood a bookcase, but unlike most 12-year-olds' bookcases, there were only 2 or 3 brightly colored spines, the rest being dull, unimaginative colors, like gray or black. Those 3 books were the only color in the drab room. He nestled back into the armchair, tucking his feet under him with the ramen resting precariously on one of the arms, as he reached for a dark green book. The book was the color of dying grass, the covers stained with patches of dark brown, the gold lettering too faded for most to make out. The Legend of the Gutsy Ninja. Naruto traced the edge of the book, before turning to where his bookmark laid inside the book's musty pages. "Why don't you just give up?" shouted the furious enemy ninja. "I'm tired of playing hide and seek." I was tired now. This game of cat and mouse had gone on too long, and my chakra was running dangerously low. I opened my hand and looked down at my last 2 smoke bombs. I closed my eyes and thought of home, my helpless comrades and countrymen, praying that my hopeless plan would work. Throwing the bombs, I disappeared from the enemy line of sight. Naruto ate a few mouthfuls of ramen before turning back to his book. But I was too tired, before I managed to even land a hit. The enemy had a kunai aimed at my head and forced me to my knees. "Give up. There's no use, you have lost," he spat, sneering down at me. But I would not give up without a last fight. That was my ninja way. "Can I just say one last thing?" I tried to get back to my feet and stare at my opponent in the eyes, but the enemy wanted to hear nothing more from me. "I don't want to hear it," he yelled, slamming me up against the tree. "Just give up and die." The body, the clone, pinned against the tree, disappeared in a puff of smoke. I stood behind him now, with a kunai against his neck, trying to make me give up. Rage built inside me. I would never give up. A few more mouthfuls of instant ramen disappeared from the cup. "Koge Bunshin?" the enemy whispered, suddenly realizing he had been tricked. I knocked him to the ground with the flat of my hand. Even if you kill me, another will take my place. They will attack the village." He laughed, looking up at me evilly. "There will be no peace, as long as we live in this accursed world of ninjas." This was something that my mind had turned to recently, the pain and suffering that we brought upon the innocent world. "I will break the curse then." I told him if there's such thing as peace, I will find it. I will not give up. The smug look on his face was replaced by confusion. Who are you?" he asked. A leaf fell from the overhanging trees. "My name is." He set the book back down on the shelf and stacked the empty ramen cup next to it. It brought back bad memories, too many parallels that made his head spin. Jiraiya loved that book, as did his father, so it seemed by the note Jiraiya had penciled in the first few pages of the novel. Naruto had never loved the book. It seemed hollow, propaganda more than anything. "Fight for your village. Die for your village." That was all it really wanted to say in the end. There was nothing truly admirable about that. He was interrupted from his thoughts by the sunlight that had begun to filter through the small window to his right, letting him know that dawn was approaching, and that the shop that he worked in needed opening before the sun got too high. He did not own the shop. It was Jiraiya's. It wasn't the ideal place to all to work, but he had no parents to pay for the things that he needed, and he refused to accept anything from the Sandame. He worked at a bookstore, where he sold the newest Icha books. Kakashi was a frequent customer, since he insisted on taking the brightly bound book everywhere, and they weren't exactly jutsu-proof yet. The amount of times the silver-haired jounin had come in with a soggy stodge of paper after a suetun jutsu that came a bit too close, or a piece of charred paper when he forgot to avoid a kaiten jutsu, were beyond human comprehension. Of course there were other customers that came, both men and women, but he remembered no faces. There was a small section near the back of the store that sold The Legend of the Gutsy Ninja and its much unknown sequel, but very few even bothered to look. But if they had, they would have seen a well-polished shelf and almost lovingly arranged stacks of books. But no one cared about those books. Icha was what came first. Naruto walked through his front door, quickly locking it before walking down the dim street towards the bookshop. The street was almost silent and he could only see one window lit up, the shadows of human life stirring behind closed shutters. The street lamps were beginning to dim and die, and the sky to the east was turning a lighter purple. Sunrise was only an hour or so away now. People would begin to appear on the streets, and by then he wanted to be hidden in the shop which few people visited. The rusted, brown key entered the ancient lock and there was an audible thunk as the mechanism opened and the dark brown door swung inwards. Jingling, a little bell hung over the doorway. He closed the door and woodenly changed the small hanging sign from closed to open, and sat back in his chair waiting for the customers to arrive. Naruto watched the young academy students running down the street and smiled a little. He himself had never been to the academy, or any kind of place that had involved children his own age. He had never spent time growing up like these children would. His training had been intense from the day he had begun. He had been ruthlessly pushed to be better than anyone else, perform things that people twice his age would be hard-pressed to follow. It had been living hell, constant sessions of healing to repair worn, malformed bones, their childish structure unable to cope under the strain of constant use, to repair torn muscles and chakra pathways. It was enough to wish that you'd never been born. The bell rang. "Good morning, sir." Naruto nodded from his seat behind the paneled counter, idly flicking through a book on the history of Konoha, a book he knew off by heart, but there were some sections he'd never get tired of. "What can I help you with this morning?" The boy's tone was abrupt, almost enough to be considered impolite, but his words were polite enough, and it was rare that his sharp nature would turn away customers. Plus the true Icha fans knew that this shop was the one that mysteriously seemed to have the signed copies. The customer didn't seem at all bothered by the clipped tones directed towards him and instead smiled lopsidedly. "Good morning there, Naruto. I suppose you heard that the new Ichas were in then? News travels fast these days." "I suppose it does." The customer wandered over to a gleaming bookcase, the heavy scent of old wood and paper an almost relaxing concoction. "You seem to be keeping well. And you as well. I heard you passed your first genin team not too long ago." Kakashi sighed, shoulders tensed and head bowed. "It's not going to well, is it?" Naruto's tone broke, dropping from casual indifference to that of genuine concern. His book forgotten and his eyes firmly raised. "Who are they?" Kakashi seemed surprised. He'd made it a habit to drop by the bookshop every month or so after he'd discovered that his old student had reappeared amongst the musty pages, but the boy rarely responded to anything outside his work, and never had he talked about shinobi matters. "Acha Seisuch. I bet he's just a bucket of fun." Naruto chuckled, rubbing his temples his right hand as he continued to look up at Kakashi. "The council decided I could teach him how to use the Sharingan." He shrugged, "and I got Haruno Sakura. Never heard of her, or the family. Do you think she's going to last?" "Truthfully, she has a little promise, but she's unfocused. Haruno is just a young girl after all. If she's out on the field, and she's not focused, Haruno will just get killed." Naruto noted dryly with a nonchalant wave of his hand, "Young or not." The older man nodded, disliking the coldness of the Naruto's words but not criticizing for fear it would stop the boy from talking. This was, after all, the first proper conversation they had had in a long while, but he couldn't help but wonder exactly why. "And a kid called Kensuke. You got Tora's nephew? Ouch." He was a little loud and a little volatile, clearly taking after his aunt in more ways than one, but his parents often tried to dissuade him from taking up the life of a Konoha ninja. They were a calm, respectable family, more involved in agriculture than fighting. His unrefined. Kakashi noted, "But no matter how hard I push, they don't act like a team. It's not looking good for them. Will you fail this team as well?" Kakashi frowned, his brow furrowing as he thought about his options. Did he really want to fail them? He felt like he owed it to the village to take care of Sasuke, and Tora to take care of her nephew. Sakura was something he just had to put up with. I might. I don't know. They're currently on probation after their last mission. Even with the Chunin exams coming up, I don't think I'd put them forward." Naruto took a slim brown box from a nearby bookcase, popped the lid and promptly shoved it under the counter. He nodded as Kakashi explained the poor situation, but didn't offer any advice. There was a moment of silence. "Are there times when you question Dash?" Naruto stopped, midway through his sentence, and grimaced. Kakashi was more than eager to hear what the boy had to say and made the mistake of asking. "I didn't hear what you said there." Naruto's grimace turned into an expression of pained silence, before it melted away and he replied. Forget I said anything, please. I have a busy day and some cataloging to finish by noon. So if you don't mind. Oh, sure. The older man felt hurt that he was being dismissed so abruptly, especially after it seemed like Naruto was about to open up to him again. I guess I'll see you around. Naruto nodded, but didn't say another word, simply watching the Jounin leave the shop with hardened blue eyes. His hands shook as he opened the door to the back room and poured himself a cup of tea. The tea brought back haunting memories, but the doctor said it would dull his nerves. So he drank. Had the day finished so quickly? From his tall seat in the bookshop, Naruto could see the pale blue sky begin to tinge red and gold, like the leaves on the trees in autumn, spectacle that wouldn't be unfamiliar in the not-so-distant future. He wondered if Kakashi had decided what to do with his failing genin team. He knew that the councils were unlikely to allow the Uchiha to be failed completely, and Naruto wondered if they would put the boy into the early ANBU training program. He couldn't decide whether that would be a decent idea or a perilously bad one. He was a testament to the failures of the ANBU system. It remembered a conversation from a few years back, when Kakashi had first been forced to take a genin team. A cover-up of his ANBU activities. What are you going to do then, senpai? The young blonde asked. Kakashi shook his head, replacing the first ever Icha book back in his kunai pouch. I'm not really sure, it just doesn't feel right. I don't think they're old enough yet. They have a right to be children before we force them to grow up. He looked over at his young companion, suddenly painfully aware at just how young this boy was. Had he not deserved a childhood too? Naruto looked wistful for a moment, staring down from their perch at the top of the gargantuan gates to the village. Don't worry, senpai. I don't care anymore. Naruto smiled, stretching his arms awkwardly above his head, which forced Kakashi to remember the injury the young boy had received on their last mission. So do you think that you will ever pass a team? Kakashi chuckled. When I find the right team, I might just pass them. Naruto nodded, running a hand through his wild blonde hair with a sigh. An action which couldn't help but remind Kakashi of how much Naruto looked like his father. They'll have to be pretty special for that. Hey. The sun had begun to disappear now and the sky was taking a purple hue, and since there were no customers, there was nothing keeping him at the shop any longer. Business had been rather slow that day, not that it was ever hectic. It did have a particularly seedy reputation. He knew that as soon as the word got out about the new, signed, limited edition copies of Icha Paradise that were being sold, the villagers' perverts were likely to crawl out of the woodwork. Naruto winced. It would not be pretty. He breathed out, unaware that he had been holding his breath. The run-in with Kakashi that day had left him feeling shaken, no matter how much herbal tea he had drunk. Just don't think about it. So much easier if you don't remember. If you simply forget. But there was something that refused to let him forget. There was something that refused to allow him to forget all the blood that he had shed. At the beginning he had been so young and naive, he had understood about life and death. ANBU would never have accepted him into their ranks if he did not. But he had never truly understood that what he did affected people indirectly. The man that had been hired by one political leader to kill another, most likely because he needed the money to feed his family, or care for them if they were sick. Without his income they would starve and die. Naruto would have killed the target if that's what the mission required. Only a handful of failed missions, compared to the hundreds he had completed during his years in ANBU. How many people had been affected indirectly by those missions? How many had starved, died, become too ill to care for their own families? It was the last mission that... No! He shook his head violently and picked up the keys to the shop, his hand trembling a little. No, it's all in the past. I'm sorry. The bell jingled as the door was opened, and Naruto could still hear the thing as he shut and locked it. I never meant for it to turn out like this. Stars begin to flicker into life above the rapidly darkening streets, the moon already filling Konoha with a silver glow, and the still people on the street were buzzing with excitement. There was a festival tomorrow. Naruto wouldn't be going. He had never gone to the festival. No matter how much Jiraiya, the Sandaime or Kakashi tried to force him to go. His house was just up ahead, but he turned down one of the side streets instead. The shaking in his hands hadn't subsided and he didn't feel like going home yet. It wasn't as if anyone would miss him if he came home late. It was dark now, the sky an inky black, stars a stark contrast, shining brightly. He avoided a trio of children who were too busy in their game to notice anyone in their way. He could hear as they disappeared was a girl yelling, "We're so gonna get done for this Konohamaru-kun." Naruto stopped and looked back in curiosity. Konohamaru? The grandson of the Sandaime Hokage? He strained his eyes to see if he could see the backs of the retreating figures, but they had already disappeared. Last time I saw Konohamaru he must have been about 4 or 5 years old. He laughed softly. I wonder if he remembers me. I used to see him quite often when he was younger. He continued his walk along the street, with no particular destination in mind, managing to skillfully avoid those main road where the most people walked. A cool wind ruffled his hair, making it dance like a field of straw. What he would give to start his life all over again. His feet took him to the outskirts of Konoha, towards the eastern training grounds. He only went there for one reason. The dark marble epitaph stood like a lonely stranger in the clearing, the moonlight reflecting on its smooth surface, the engraved names clearly defined in the stone's eerie glow. He crouched down next to the stone and traced a finger down the hundreds of names on the cenotaph. The first name that he knew, Ucha Obito. He had been one of his senpai's best friends. He had died long before Naruto had been born, but he had been the one that had taught Kakashi that friends always come before the rules. His finger traced further down the marble surface. Namikaze Minato. The Yondaime, his father. I'm sorry, father. You wanted me to be strong and protect the village. I just can't do it. The next name that he knew, Kogun Dinu. A teammate of Tora's before she became ANBU. He had been killed by a missing nin on a recon mission. The missing nin was Okini Meijuru, the third member of Tora's original genin team. She very rarely spoke about them. The next name was a fresher scar. Uryu Asamaru. Yama. The details of his death were classified. Only those in ANBU and the Hokage himself had known how Yama had died. The only known thing about his death had been that he was killed in action, like the rest of those on the cenotaph. Naruto shook his head bitterly. Did they not understand? Did they not realize that becoming a shinobi only meant death and destruction? Destroying the long-awaited peace that others strived so hard to achieve? Why had he once dreamed to be Hokage? He didn't know anymore. Was it for respect? Power? Admiration? Fear? It had been a child's dream, nothing more. To be Hokage was to be the leader of the destruction and the destroyer of peace, nothing more than that. It was a foolish dream, he whispered in the night, but there was no one around to hear him. He stood to his feet, stretching his hands above his head and yawned. The moon was high up in the jet sky by now. How long had he been out here? Longer than he had planned anyway. The breeze was cooler now, with an edge that wasn't there before. He pushed his hands further into his pockets. The house was cold when he got back, the rooms as silent as tombs. Naruto was the only thing that moved. He sat down in his worn armchair, casting a brief glance at the faded green book he had been reading earlier but resisted the urge to read. He heated a cup of water to make tea, but sat and simply watched the vapor trails until they sped away and the water was cold. The room was given one quick look over before the light was switched off and the silent room was plunged into darkness. Tomb was a fitting word. Naruto kicked off his shoes and they landed with an audible thunk next to his bed, causing the entire frame to shudder. He undressed and crept under the ice-cold blankets, hoping that they would warm up soon. He was sure that ice cubes would be comfortable with this temperature. Naruto had meant to be home earlier to turn the heating on. But, well, it didn't matter now. Golden sunlight filtered through the murky glass, shining in the blonde's eyes, waking him up from his peaceful slumber. He cursed before rolling onto his side and stretching. He would have preferred to sleep in, today of all days especially, but he needed to be up and about early, so he didn't get caught in the rush of people shopping for the festival. Naruto boiled the kettle and grabbed the last miso-flavored instant ramen out of the cupboard, then cursed when he remembered that his shoes were upstairs. Pouring the boiling water into the cup, he bolted upstairs and grabbed his shoes from where he had thrown them the night before, and then bolted back down. He cleaned the fork he had used the night before, not bothering to dig out any of the others that he was sure were hidden beneath the mounds of unused, dirty plates and dishes. One day he would get around to it. Just not today. The ramen was devoured in seconds, leaving an empty cup and yet another dirty fork to throw onto the stack of dirty plates. He counted through the money he had left in his wallet, just in case, and then left through the front door. Naruto prayed that he didn't bump into Kakashi or Jiraiya. The bag rested uncomfortably in his hands, the thin plastic handles digging deep into the flesh of his hands. People already filled the streets, getting ready for the festival that night. He saw something out of the corner of his eye that forced him to stop and take a second look. How long had it been since he had last visited Ichiraku's ramen stand? It seemed to be pretty empty. That was good. He pushed through the crowd towards the ramen stand, wincing as he was crushed between the constantly moving mass of bodies. Ducking down low, he managed to squeeze through the crowd. He grabbed one of the stools and vaulted onto it, breathing out a sigh of relief. "One miso ramen, please." The brown-haired woman turned from where she had been cleaning the used dishes that had been used by previous customers, a surprised expression crossing her face. "Is that you, Naruto-kun?" How long had it been since she had last seen Naruto? She didn't know the answer, but it had been a long time since the blonde boy had sat in front of the counter and ordered something. Was it about a year? A year and a bit since he had last visited? IAM couldn't see the 3-year-old Naruto that used to visit Ichiraku's with the 3rd Hokage, shouting things like, "One day I'm gonna be Hokage or ramen." This boy, he couldn't really be classed as that boy any longer. He was not the cheerful blonde that he had once been. She didn't know what had made him leave the shinobi forces, but it had hurt him in more than one way. His blonde hair was shaggy and unkempt, falling over blue eyes that stared out hollowly from a worn face. The bowl of steaming ramen was placed in front of her blonde customer. "So how have you been, Naruto-kun?" The boy looked up from his noodles and shrugged. "All right, I suppose." He shrugged. "How about you?" "Everything's good. We should be getting a lot of customers with the festival on tonight." She trailed off as she saw him tense up. Then she remembered something. "It's your birthday today, isn't it, Naruto-kun?" She smiled as the boy didn't look up, playing with his ramen with a chopstick. "Yeah, it is," he muttered, not meeting her eyes. "Are you doing anything special? Inviting friends around?" He looked up and shrugged. "Not really, just a quiet night at home. I don't like the crowds." "So you're not going to the festival tonight then? It would be good fun, I promise. I'll treat you to free ramen." She smiled brightly, but her attempt was in vain. He had already finished his bowl and was standing up. "I'm not going to the festival. It's a waste of time, really." He began to count out the coins onto the counter, but IAM waved a hand to stop him. "It's on the house, Naruto-kun." She smiled. He looked up and let out a small smile, and IAM could almost see the younger, happier Naruto, but soon it was replaced by a mask of indifference. "Thanks, IAM. I might see you soon if there's more free ramen." Before she could reply, he had already melted back into the crowd. She reached down to grab the dirty bowl, and saw that he had forgotten to pick up the coins he had been going to pay with. IAM looked back at the jostling crowd, but there was no sign of the young blonde that had just occupied the seat in front of her. Had he left the coins on purpose? Drip, drip, drip. Every single drip from the tap made all his hair stand on end. Jumping up from his seat, he stalked over to the offending infernal kitchen sink and grabbed the leaking faucets with his hands. They groaned pitifully as he jammed them closed, and metal shrieked as they were contorted into foreign shapes, bent in odd directions. Damn! At least water wasn't spraying everywhere. The lights from the festival caused the sky to light up, making the usual, comforting, inky blackness turn to an orange glow. He wondered what happened at the festival. What did people do? They were supposed to be mourning, remembering those lost, not celebrating like they did. He could hear laughter, and the tinkling of the small bell-like toys the children waved on the sticks, and could imagine the lanterns drifting off into the night sky, like man-made stars. Naruto closed his eyes and breathed out as his resolve wavered. Perhaps he could just... His eyes snapped open. What was he thinking? Nestling into the warmth of his armchair, he rested his head and drifted away. When had he fallen asleep? He never remembered falling asleep. And what had woken him up? Boodum boodum. He sat very still for a few seconds, his heart beating like a drum in his chest, mouth as dry as the paper in the book that had been thrown to the floor. Boodum boodum. Naruto got silently to his feet, padding towards the kitchen door, instinctively making each footstep as noiseless as the last. He restricted the urge to ask if someone was there, waiting in the shadows of his hall. Boodum boodum. There! A noise, if only for a second, and the whisper of cloth against skin as someone carelessly shifted their weight from one foot to another. An intruder? Yet he had locked his door earlier, so that meant that whoever was in his hallway was either a ninja, or a very talented lockpick. He glanced around the room for any possible weapons to defend himself. Kunai? Why had he given Kakashi all his damn kunai? I don't need them anymore. He handed over his kunai pouch. The single gray eye looked up at him concerned. You don't have tea dash. The kunai pouch was thrown at the silver-haired man. Take it. At the time it had seemed to be the right decision. Even yesterday that idea was a good idea. But right now this second, that idea had not been thought through enough. How was a normal civilian boy supposed to look after himself? He would have parents. Naruto thought bitterly as he leant into the shadows of the kitchen wall, blending in, as he formulated a plan to combat his late-night intruder. All his knives were hidden in the dirty cluster that were his unclean dishes and empty ramen cups. He had no kunai, no shuriken, and he had given his ninjato back when he had left the service of the Black Ops. That just left taijutsu or ninjutsu, and he silently cursed. Those were some of the things he had sworn never to use ever again. Perhaps if he just left by a window? He looked up at the grimy windows and tried to remember the occasion when had he last opened them. The rust seemed to have melded them shut from the look of it. They were obviously not on his list of options right now. So maybe he could sneak past? The intruder was making his way carefully up the hall now, and his chakra signature well hidden. The only thing that had Naruto alerted to his presence was the small rasping noise as the intruder's feet came into contact with the wooden floor. He readied his hands into the correct seal and breathed in. Damn! Why does this have to happen? My Seigekyu no Jutsu, he whispered, hoping that whoever was creeping up his corridor had not heard him. It was as if new life had been poured into his veins, like a refreshing wave that washed away the staleness beneath his skin. But he couldn't allow himself to be overwhelmed by the fresh power coursing through his pathways. This was the only way he could think of that did not involve violence. He had promised that day he would never commit an intentional act of violence towards another human being as long as he lived, now completely unseen. Naruto waited without movement, until the intruder had begun to make his way up the stairs and into the upper rooms. The footsteps came closer still, and now Naruto could see the figure of a full-grown man, kunai in hand, creeping down the corridor. Naruto waited for the intruder to step on the squeaky floorboards, but the familiar sound never came, and it made his blood run cold. The intruder had scouted the house before. It was the only way he could have known about the floorboard. This is it, Naruto thought to himself, now or never. He stepped carefully from his hiding place, not making a sound. The jutsu might make sure no one saw you, but they could as sure as hell hear you if you put one foot out of place. The door was in front of him now, the silver-blue moonlight looking even more inviting than usual, bathing part of his hall in an otherworldly glow. His breaths were shallow and controlled, each and every footfall silent as falling snow. His pulse should have been racing, like anyone else in that kind of situation, but his pulse was merely quickened, and his mouth a little dry. Warm flesh touched cool metal as his fist enclosed the door handle. He stole a quick look back. No sign of his intruder returning yet, but he had to leave quickly. He threw open the door and the hinges squeaked wildly, echoing around his silent house, and Naruto swore. The door was flung shut behind him as his heart beat hard rhythms against his ribcage as he disappeared like a wraith into the darkness of night, ghosting towards the main street with his feet gliding over the street cobbles, like he wasn't a being of this world. Normally the rooftops would have been a better option, as the streets were usually crowded or blocked off during the festivals, where the roofs were almost always empty, unless there were other shinobi going places as well. But a civilian moving on the roofs at night during a festival attracted a certain amount of unwanted attention. Naruto was certain that he had lost whoever had tried to attack him earlier, but he wouldn't slow down until he reached a main street, where there were more people to fade into. Even if it did mean going to the festival, he didn't have to enjoy himself. There's too many people, Naruto thought to himself as he avoided being crushed by the masses of bodies that engulfed him from all sides. He longed to go back to his house, where there was only him and the silent books, but he wouldn't be able to go back there tonight, just in case whoever it had been earlier had stayed there and wait for him to come back. Naruto needed to find Kakashi and ask if he could crash at his for the night, but there was no telling where he'd be able to find the one-eyed Jounin teacher. Ichiraku's would have been nice and relaxing right now, but it would be full to the brim with loud, laughing people, and he had left his wallet back in his rooms. As he got towards the main square, the crowd began to thin out a little, which allowing Naruto breathing space, and he accepted it gratefully. After 2 years of living a pretty solitary life, so many people in the same place became a bit unnerving. He scanned over the faces of the people surrounding him, searching for the face of the silver-haired Jounin. Kakashi always came to the festival. So where was he? Market stalls lined the street ahead of him, selling all manner of things, from toys and sweets, to clothes and trinkets. People crowded around each one, bartering with the stall owners for the best price. Perhaps Kakashi was along here? Naruto wandered along the street with his hands pressed deep into his pockets. Why did people come here? He had never thought to ask anyone that before. Why did they come to a festival that celebrated death and destruction? The street was bathed in a golden glow from the hundreds of fairy lights strung along the walls and the various stands selling their goods. Small children, awake far past their usual bedtime, ran through the crowd, weaving in and out of the people, laughing and shouting. The bell toys jingling with their footsteps. Naruto took the opportunity and smiled a little. It was nice to see them so happy and oblivious to the rest of the world. But looking around, it wasn't just the children. Adults had a certain spark in their eyes, smiles on their faces, civilian and shinobi alike. It made no sense, but there was just a feeling of happiness that surrounded the whole street, if not the whole of Konoha. He absent-mindedly sidestepped a cream blur, a ninken, if his eyes didn't lie, even if this one was a little on the runty side. Akamaru, come back. Naruto turned to where the voice had come from, but couldn't see whoever it was who had shouted. An Inuzuka? A boy around his own age burst from the crowd, wearing a gray jacket with a black fur lining, looking frantically left and right. Mom was joking. Honest. Had the ninken run away? He had known an Inuzuka once. She had been a friend of Tora's. Not that they had ever really been introduced. Naruto stopped his nostalgia to stare at the feral-looking boy, who seemed to be getting hysterical at the loss of his closest friend. Naruto guessed that he and his dog didn't really separate much, and was asking the people around him if they had seen the ninken pass. Naruto sighed. Hey! He shouted, and the Inuzuka turned. Your ninken went that way. Naruto shouted again, pointing towards the street where he had last seen the nin dog. The Inuzuka smiled, canine teeth flashing in the orange light. Thanks. Naruto the blonde replied. It was most likely he would never talk to the Inuzuka again. What was the harm in telling the boy his name? He began to run towards the street that Naruto had pointed out. My name's Kiba, Inuzuka Kiba. Nice to meet YA Naruto. The Inuzuka, Kiba, disappeared after his dog, and just like that the encounter was over. Well, that was interesting, and wondered what time it was. BYY the height of the moon, it was sometime after 11. But he had left his watch behind when he had to escape the house. And where in the world was Kakashi? The last market stall held no sign of the elusive man, and Naruto couldn't help but sigh for what felt like the millionth time that night. Perhaps Ichiraku's wasn't such a bad idea. It was certainly no worse than sitting out here in the busy street. Even if he had already been to Ichiraku's that morning. It was just up ahead. He could see the sign from where he was on the street, and it didn't seem too full. There were only a few customers at the counter. Perhaps it was too late for some people to eat, and the plethora of sweet treat stalls were no doubt drawing away the usuals. His stomach rumbled, painfully reminding him that he had forgotten to eat that evening. There was one free seat, at the very edge on the left. He ran and vaulted onto it before anyone else got there before him. A miso, please. Iame looked down, and her face split into a wide, childish grin. You came, Naruto-kun. He looked up, face awkwardly trying to smile like it had forgotten how. I guess I did after all. One extra large birthday ramen coming up. Naruto continued to smile awkwardly, before allowing his smile to drop as Iame turned her attention to cooking. The mouth-watering, savory smells drifting from the pans. Naruto-kun, another voice asked, and a single gray creased into an upside-down U shape. It's nice to see you out at the festival. It was then that the silver-haired Jounin noticed the amount of killing intent the blonde radiated. What did I do? You've been here the whole time? The blonde hadn't even turned his way. He was staring at the counter in front of him, face deadpan and expressionless, but with hunched, tense shoulders. Kakashi rubbed the back of his head. Which answer would get him killed? I just got here. The blonde looked up and nodded, face still serious, but Kakashi felt like he had avoided a death sentence. He was surprised when he heard him say, I was just wondering. I need a place to crash tonight. Can I stay at yours? And Kakashi raised an eyebrow. What happened? He asked the young boy warily. Well, someone broke in, so I escaped. Naruto shrugged, no big deal. Kakashi lost his bored, half-awake look. Now he looked like he was ready to go and break some necks. Were they armed? He growled. If a kunai counts. Naruto shrugged, leaning against the counter as Iame delivered his bowl of ramen. Their conversation paused for a moment as the blonde took a bite, despite Kakashi wanting to clarify the situation, and they were soon interrupted. Whatcha doing, Kakashi-sensei? A voice questioned childishly. A boy with a wild mop of dark blonde hair and green eyes popped over Kakashi's shoulder. His name was Hikuro Kensuke, nephew of Hikuro Naruki, otherwise known as Tora. I'm doing nothing, Kensuke-kun. Absolutely nothing. His green eyes swiveled to Naruto. And who's this Kakashi-sensei? A friend. Naruto meet Kensuke. He leaned backwards, so the other two members of Team 7 were visible. The pink-haired girl is Haruno Sakura. She was pretty, Naruto thought, even if her forehead was a little on the large side, but Sakura was currently focusing all her attention on the other member of Team 7. And the last member. Kakashi hoped that Naruto wouldn't react to obviously Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto nodded. He had been friends with another Uchiha once. His second ANBU captain after Kakashi himself had been Uchiha Itachi. When Itachi had abandoned the village, Naruto had been promoted as the next ANBU captain for the squad. He had protested, refused, and downright rejected the job with a vengeance. But after the Sandame himself had asked the blonde, he had no choice but to accept the promotion. But Itachi's desertion of the village had hurt him deeply. Interesting bunch you have there, sensei. Naruto nodded in acknowledgement, slipping in an old term which felt fitting for the situation. Kakashi hadn't been his sensei in years. Sensei. Kensuke opened his eyes even wider than they already were, making him look like an owl. Does that mean Kakashi-sensei is your teacher too? Naruto stopped and looked up at the fidgeting child. No, it was a slip of the tongue, he said calmly, before he turned back to Kakashi. So can I stay at yours? Kakashi nodded and laughed. It'll be just like the old days, huh? Yay. Naruto turned wistfully to his huge bowl of ramen, just like the old days. Kakashi turned on the light to the spare room, before walking over to one of the cupboards to pull out some spare linen. You can crash here, the fridge is yours, get up whenever you want. It really is just like the old days. Naruto noted and Kakashi felt like it really was like the old days and they'd just come back from a mission. Those were always the rules when they'd crashed and burned after missions. Kakashi turned back towards the door. Wait, Kakashi. Kakashi turned back to face the young blonde. Why do people celebrate the festival? Isn't it sad for them? Naruto looked up, and for the first time in a long time Kakashi saw a flicker of the shinobi the boy had once been. I just don't get it. It is sad, but we honor the dead. We only won that day because of their help, their sacrifice, so we should be happy we're alive. We owe it to them. Naruto frowned, cerulean blue eyes staring. They sacrificed themselves so that we could live happily. Kakashi continued. We should be happy? Naruto's face turned towards the bed, clearly lost in thought. Thank you. He murmured finally, but he never raised his head. Kakashi nodded and smiled. Good night, Naruto-kun. The light flicked off. Ha. Finally Naruto's question that's been bugging him has been answered. And I fixed a few errors here and there. Thanks all of you who are reading this. It means so much to me. Sunlight filtered through the newly cleaned glass, shining directly into the sleeping boy's eyes, and for a brief second he regretted cleaning everything up, but only for a second. Swinging his feet around, he got up from his bed and walked towards the wardrobe. This time the floorboard didn't squeak, but had been taken up and a new board been nailed down in its place. Kakashi's spending spree at the bookstore had helped to pay for that. The kitchen counter was visible for the first time in a long time, but only after Naruto had spent hours delving out the jungle that was old ramen cups and dirty cutlery with the help of a rather reluctant ninja and his team. He had even gone to the trouble of hiring them as a D-rank mission. Even if the genin weren't impressed they had to do a D rank. It was the only way for them to get a C rank or higher after their probationary period. Jiraiya had sent back some money, and the bookstore had been going pretty well recently, since people had bought the newly released Icha books as early Christmas presents, and a movie was on the way, and with the money he made, he'd done up the house. The kitchen had been cleaned, as had all the floors and windows, the floorboards had been repaired, the taps had been fixed, he had bought a few pieces of new furniture. It was going quite well in Naruto's opinion. Kakashi's team were out of the village, having completed enough D-rank missions to be given their first C rank, escorting a merchant back to his house on the outskirts of Suna. It was simple escort mission. No doubt they would be back soon. Am I missing them? I don't even know them that well. They had been around the house helping for a week. Well, Kensuke had just shouted a lot. But missing them? Kensuke would provide the main part of the conversation, waving his arms excitedly like an overactive windmill, a wide grin of childish abandon on his face, as he told Naruto about how great a shinobi he would be, and how one day he would be the next Hokage. Naruto had just nodded politely, rather than telling the genin what life as a ninja was really like. Sakura would sit around, staring at the Uchiha like a lovesick puppy and occasionally adding her 2 cents worth to the conversation as well. The Uchiha had just stared darkly at Naruto, barely saying a sentence the whole time they had worked there, probably hating every second he and his team spent together. Kakashi was worried that perhaps Sasuke had remembered that Naruto had once stopped by his house to talk to Itachi, but he was sure that Sasuke wouldn't remember such small details as that. 2 years with nobody. Then no more than a week with people around, and I missed their company. He shook his head. Since when did I get so sentimental? Suppressing a smile, he walked to the front door. He had spent enough time inside. A week passed. And then I defeated him all on my own. Kensuke finished. A fist knocked him off the stool. You did not, Kensuke. Sasuke saved us all. You didn't help one little bit. A mad-looking Sakura stood over the poor boy, who was nursing a purple bruise on the side of his head. Sasuke was too busy ignoring everybody. Kakashi had actually passed this team. Their teamwork was so warped it was just inexistent. They had all decided to meet up for ramen at Ichiraku's to celebrate the completion of their first relatively successful sea mission. He had listened to Kensuke talk non-stop about the mission, about the things they had seen and the food they had eaten, and about the unforgiving landscape of Suna. So what did you do while we were away, Naruto-kun? He asked. Naruto shrugged, missing the company. Was what he wanted to say, but instead he blurted work. The Uchiha leant forward, directing his gaze at Naruto. You work? Don't you go to school or something? Well, that was the most I've ever heard him say. No, I used to go to school. That was kind of the truth, but I left. Kensuke's mouth turned into an O shape. You left school? Sakura asked as her jade-green eyes widened in amazement. Naruto nodded. Yeah. That's so unfair. Kensuke whined comically, crossing his arms and pouting in Naruto's direction. Was it the Ninja Academy? Sasuke surprised Naruto again by asking another question. What had got the Uchiha so talkative all of a sudden? Naruto bit his lip. Damn all Uchihas. No, it was the civilian school. Why'd YA leave? Kensuke asked, his eyes like saucers. It was kinda creepy. I didn't agree with it. If only Kensuke knew what they were really talking about. Didn't your parents force you to go back? Sakura asked. For once her back turned to the Uchiha. I don't have parents. He almost laughed at the Uchiha's expression. What? He expected himself to be the only orphan? At least he still has a brother. I wondered why we didn't see your parents when we were tidying up, Sakura added. I thought they might be on a mission. Or something. Well, that's decided then. Kensuke stood up and slammed his hands down on the counter, earning a death glare from Iame and Tucci. You're coming to my house tonight for dinner. What? Naruto looked at the boy. For dinner? Yeah. Even Aunt Naruki said she would be there. Aunt Naruki? Tora? This isn't going to end well. 7 o'clock by the academy gates. That's when Kensuke had said to meet him in this exact location. No doubt the boy was going to be a little late. Naruto laughed at his situation. He hadn't seen Naruki in 2 years, after he'd refused to talk to her, and now he was going to a family dinner with her? Did fate have a twisted sense of humor? The sounds of running feet met his ears and he glanced down at the watch on his wrist. Not too late then. I'm so sorry. I forgot how long it takes to get to the academy. Kensuke apologized, out of breath. I wasn't waiting long. A lie. But did it really matter if the kid was late? Mom. Dad. I'm back. He hoped that neither of them recognized him from his ANBU days. He had been around enough times at least for them to remember his face, but it had been 2 years. Was Tora not here yet? We're just about ready to start serving. Bring your friend through, Naruto heard a female voice say. Obviously this was Kensuke's mom. Come on. Kensuke all but dragged Naruto into the dining area. At the head of the table sat Kensuke's father and Tora's brother, Hikuro Taihei. He looked very similar to Naruki, except his eyes were the golden color of his hair, rather than his sister's brown, and his hair was a slightly more vibrant. So you must be Kensuke's new friend. Taihei hadn't changed since the last time Naruto had seen him. His voice was so relaxing and his personality so calm. Where had Kensuke come from? Yes, I am Uzumaki Naruto. The older man's eyes screwed up in concentration. Have I seen you around before, Naruto-kun? Goddamn Taihei for being so observant. I don't think so, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Sit down, sit down. The food should be ready soon, he sighed. Is Aunt Naruki coming? Kensuke asked excitedly as they sat themselves around the table. She should be. But who knows what she does anymore? Taihei chuckled sadly. Naruto perked his ears. Naruki had always put her family first. So what was wrong? A woman with long, dark brown hair came through the doorway, carrying a tray full of various steaming dishes. Her light jade eyes were full of humor, but she seemed pretty relaxed, smiling kindly at Kensuke and her husband. Naruto felt that he was intruding in this family moment. He wanted to be any place but here. Well, I hope you like ramen, Naruto-kun, she smiled at him. Including him in their moment of happiness, Kensuke said that you liked it. So I cooked it especially for you. A smile broke across his face, hoping that it didn't look too forced or awkward. He was surprised that Kensuke even noticed. He seemed to be too busy shouting things and waving his arms in the air to notice much about other people. Thank you, Kensuke, ma'am. No problemo, Naruto-kun. Kensuke grinned, not a hint of awkwardness about his expression, and Naruto couldn't help but feel jealous about the ease with which he could display his emotions to others. The bowls were set down on the table. Well, tuck in then, boys, Taihei smiled, gesturing at the food. Where was Naruki? 10 minutes into the meal, and a fair few bowls of ramen later, there was a knock at the door. Taihei stood up. I'll go get it. Be right back. The sound of a door being opened, and then a squeal of delight, then rapid footsteps, and a figure launched itself at Izumi, Taihei's wife. Aizu-chan. Kensuke-kun. Kensuke was then glomped by the speeding figure. Hi, Auntie Naruki. It was more than obvious where Kensuke got his hyper-personality from. And whose? Deep brown eyes met with cerulean blue, and various emotions flickered through the brown eyes at 1,000,000 miles an hour, before Naruto was knocked to the floor by a well-aimed glomp from Tora. Naruto. Everybody watched as their guest was smothered by Naruki's suffocating glomps. Ah, Naruki-chan? I think you're suffocating the guest. Taihei pointed out. Tora finally let go, a smile plastered over her face, looking like an older version of Kensuke. How do you know Naruto? Kensuke asked his aunt. Well, She smiled and scratched the back of her head. Long story. Far too long. Well, it's pretty early yet. Taihei started, but he was cut off by his sister. And miss out asking what's happened in my lovely family's life. But her fingers told a different story. ANBU hand code, it was the foundation of all ANBU missions. You couldn't run through a mission brief just before killing someone and alert them to your presence. Afterwards. You have some explaining to do. Naruto sighed. I look forward to it, Tora. If you don't, I will hunt you down this time, Kitsune. The meal passed without incident. It was late now, around 10. Kensuke yawned. I think it's time for bed for some people. Taihei remarked, his eyes also sagging slightly with fatigue. Obviously Kensuke was a handful. Kensuke protested a little before he was forced to bed by Izumi. Sorry, Naruto-kun, but we're going to bed now. Naruto stood. Thank you for inviting me, he bowed. Thank you for being so polite, Naruto-kun. Taihei smiled. Feel free to come again whenever you like. Are you staying in Muto? Taihei asked his sister. Sorry, Taihei-kun. She grinned. I got an important mission early tomorrow, from the Hokage himself. A shame, Taihei shrugged. Kensuke really misses you when you're gone. He's a ninja now, he can deal with it. Izumi and Kensuke had disappeared, leaving only Naruto, Taihei, and Naruki. Shall I walk you home, Naruto-kun? Taihei asked, obviously completely unaware that Naruto could take care of himself. It's all right, brother. I'm going that way. I can take him for you. Naruki offered, embraced her, placing a single kiss on her forehead. Come back safely. So how have you been, Naru? He shrugged, then stretched his hands out in front of him. Bored? I see you're still in ANBU. Yeah, there's not else much now, especially after I got promoted. Naruto looked up, a hint of surprise flashing across his face. A promotion? You are now looking at Tora. Taishu, she bowed, flourishing her arms wildly, a huge grin plastered across her face. Naruto smiled, chuckling a little as he clapped slowly. A squad captain? Well done, Tora. Haim, I took a lot longer than I thought it would. It only took you a year to be promoted, Kitsune. She stuck her tongue out at the young blonde. I had extra help. She raised an eyebrow. You just had good teachers. That's nothing special. Naruto's head wilted. His eyes, once happy, looked pitifully lost. Maybe, but after merging with the Kyuubi, he trailed off. There was a long awkward silence, filled by the footfalls of the two, as they walked side by side, down the dark, empty streets of Konoha. Taihei seemed pretty worried about you, Naruto pointed out, breaking the awkward silence. He heard about my promotion a few weeks ago, she sighed. He's a pacifist, and he gets worried about all the fighting I do. Ah! Naruto nodded. I remember him fussing over you when we got back from the mission to Iwa. He acted like you were about 10. She blushed and laughed. I remember that. I'm just so glad nobody else was there to see that. My reputation as a badass ANBU would have crumbled to dust that day. She turned her attention back to her companion. Come on. Lighten up a little, ya no. She waved her hands in the air, and Naruto knew that Kensuke had gotten his personality from his rather erratic aunt. You're so gloomy sometimes, she pouted. You smile, but most of the time you don't mean it. Do I have to mean it? He asked, a rueful smile flickering across his face. She looked shocked. Even Kitsune knew when to kick back and have a good time. Naruto-kun. Remember the party? She laughed. Oh Kitsune. It was awesome. Remember? She began to laugh, but stopped, trailing off into silence after she realized she was laughing alone. Please. Naruto had stopped walking, just staring at the floor, refusing to meet her eyes. Never call me that again. His voice was like reinforced steel. Tora stopped walking as well. Her usually ecstatic eyes were half closed in pain. Sumi Mason. Naruto. Neither moved, nor made any attempts to break the awkward silence. So this is what it's like now, Naruki thought sadly. Is what he said really true? The biting wind whistled down the narrow empty street, breaking the depressed trance both of them were immersed in. So you've got a big mission tomorrow. Naruto started. Wanna tell me the details? Tora chuckled, the moment before disappearing in an instant, as if it had never existed. You know it's against the rules. Naruto grinned. Well, it's an S-rank secret. Tora chuckled apparently. She checked the street, looking both left and right to check it was safe, and that nobody was eavesdropping on their conversation. Once she was happy that there was nobody listening, she whispered. Orochimaru has been sighted, around Otogokyo. I see. Naruto nodded with clenched fists. Well, let's hope somebody at least manages to kill that snake. The mission is reckon only key, Naruto. She sighed miserably. It was common knowledge amongst the ANBU that Naruto had promised to be the one to kill the snake Sannin. There were only a few people who knew the reason why, and even less truly understood why he wanted to kill the man with his own two hands. Shame. Naruto breathed, his breath hanging momentarily in the air before dissipating. You harbor too much hate. Tora cautioned in a worried tone. You want peace, but... I know. Hardened blue eyes met worried brown. I can handle it. What is the point of hating someone just because they think differently from you? She growled, unconsciously clenching her fists. You approve of what that thing has done. Naruto yelled. You agree with senseless pain and torture for a selfish cause. Tora stepped backwards, surprised at the amount of hate in the boy's voice, each word like a blade. Then perhaps you shouldn't stay here. He roared. Perhaps you should run off to that snake you seem to be protecting. Naruto, please. The blood was thundering in his ears. All he could see was her lips moving, and her eyes beginning to fill with tears. Make it stop. She was crying now. What was he even saying to her? He couldn't tell. Please make it stop. Why wasn't she leaving already? Why was she still there? Please. She was moving towards him now. She should have been afraid, but there was no hint of fear in those eyes. Make me stop. It was a whisper, but to his ears it was a shout. He forced his eyes shut. He didn't want her pity, or her forgiveness, as he deserved neither. Warmth. It's okay, Naruto-kun. She whispered in his ear. It's okay. He felt the walls in his mind crumble as he sank to his knees in silence. Yet he didn't even shed a single tear. Asterisk cries asterisk. Let's hope Naruto feels better next chapter. But who's this he Tora was talking about? And why did Naruto get so upset? Asterisk evil laugh asterisk. Now for some Q&As. Though some might not make sense after I changed the chapter. Why Naruto is so afraid of an intruder coming in his house even though he could probably kill him or her. From SPIDERMAN. Well, Naruto isn't scared really. He knows that he could take the intruder out with just a finger, or a spoon, depending on how he's feeling. But he made promises to himself after he left ANBU not to use ninjutsu, or taijutsu, or genjutsu to hurt another living being. I must know how Team 7 will react when they find out who Naruto truly is. From Christina. You shall find out, because that's always my personal favorite part in a story like this. Do the villagers hate Naruto for the fox or something? Because he seems to go wherever he wants and not be bothered? From Inugo Kurosaki. In the canon series, he's in the village a lot, causing mayhem at every opportune moment. But in this story, he's pretty much been raised as a shinobi from a very young age, so the villagers haven't really seen him much. And as he grew up, he went on missions in other countries, so not many villagers knew that he was the demon container, even if he's merged with Kyuubi now. So, Is Naruto gonna get dragged along on a mission somehow with Team 7? Is Sarutobi gonna visit him? From Lord Ezreal. Who knows? And yes, your idea from the review is awesome. You should write it yourself. You'd get loads of reviews, I can just tell. Why would Naruto go to a festival that celebrates the death of his father and the cursing of his existence with a demon? From In a Real Pickle. He was forced out of the house because he didn't want to hurt the intruder. Will anything be happening anytime soon to knock him out of his funk, or are we going to have to wait like 6 months for the invasion? From In a Real Pickle. Is this chapter an answer XD? And the invasion? You'll just have to wait. Does this answer anyone and everyone's questions? If you want to ask more questions about this story, just send it in a review. I shall answer them in the next chapter. And thank you to everybody who just said my story is great. It made this chapter a lot easier to write with so many nice reviews. _. Broken Tool by Sakushiro. The Chunin exams? Already? Naruto raised an eyebrow in Kakashi's direction, surprised. Well. Naruto laughed, eyes sparkling momentarily, making them an even more vibrant blue than they usually were. See? I told you that you liked them. The younger man seemed so much more relaxed than usual, more prone to rare smiles and rarer laughter. Do you think they can do it, Naruto? I've never seen them train, so I wouldn't know. Well, there's a solution to that. Train with them. Naruto's eyes took a more serious light. With them. It was a wistful whisper. It wouldn't do them any harm, Kakashi shrugged, and it won't do you any either. Should I? If I help them all, there's less chance that they will die on the battlefield. From what his senpai had told him, they were all still a bit rough around the edges. Kensuke needed more work on his ninjutsu, which was, to put it nicely, in dire need of attention. Sakura, she had good intellect, when she wasn't focusing on the ucha, but everything else needed work. The ucha, his taijutsu style, needed perfecting, and Naruto had experience with fighting and exploiting the flaws of the basic ucha style. But the blonde sighed, his shoulders drooping in defeat. Maybe. The silver-haired Jounin smiled. There's a training session tomorrow morning, at 8 o'clock, training ground 7-inch. Naruto nodded. Had he got himself into? He shut the door, wincing as the sunlight shone a bit too brightly in his half-asleep eyes. 7:50 a.m. Of course Kakashi wouldn't be there until 10 a.m. at the earliest, but he was sure the lack of a sensei wouldn't stop Team 7 from training. Hey Naruto. He turned, vaguely surprised that there was anyone passing his house so early that knew him. Kakashi-sensei told me you were coming to watch us train. Kensuke shouted, waving an arm in greeting. Finally decide to become a ninja? Yeah, something like that. A curious brown box followed close behind Kensuke, stopping every time the boy did. Well, you got something following you there, Naruto said, pointing at the stalker box. The box exploded with a cloud of bright, multicolored smoke. You got cough. From inside the box emerged 3 figures. One of them was unmistakably Konohamaru. The second, a girl with long red pigtails that stood up at odd angles and rosy cheeks. The third, a sickly boy with a runny nose. They've been following me the whole way, Kensuke sighed overdramatically. And, cough, I bet you didn't see us cough her. Konohamaru coughed. Kensuke couldn't reply to that. Hey, what's going on, guys? An undeniably female voice asked. Oh, hey Sakura, Naruto greeted. The girl smiled pleasantly back at him, but when Kensuke raised a hand in greeting, shut it. Naruto felt for the kid as his face fell, the happy grin replaced by an unhappy frown. So boss. Konohamaru turned to Kensuke. You said you'd play ninja with us. Kensuke rubbed the back of his head. I did. Yeah, the snotty-nosed boy yelled. An evil aura surrounded Sakura, and her eyes flashed evilly. Play ninja? She raised a fist and poor Kensuke flinched. That's so pathetic. Her fist flew towards the boy. Boss, let's run for it. The monster's gone crazy. Konohamaru yelled, seeing it all as a game. That set the pinkette right off the wall. Why you come back here? She began to chase the 4, her fist raised ready to blast them to oblivion. And then Konohamaru hit something. Something tall and black, and young boy was lifted into the air. That hurt punk. Which way had they gone? In their mad dash for survival, Naruto had lost track of which way the 5 had here? Nope. Kensuke was close. He could hear him yelling, and Konohamaru too. Nothing much for it then. Naruto put on an impressive amount of speed, suddenly turning from a running boy into a speeding. But who were they? You leaf shinobi are all wimps. He looked at the darkly dressed boy that held the Sandame's grandson, and a quick glimpse at the Hatayate classed him as a genin. From him stood a girl dressed in purple, her hair ties up in spiky ponytails. Had there been one more boy there, Naruto could have safely classified them as the children of the current Kazekage of Suna. Konohamaru, the two other children yelled, unable to do anything due to the fright they felt. Keeping their feet locked to the spared at glance at Sakura and Kensuke, they too were locked in place, only able to watch as Konohamaru dangled helplessly in the tall boy's grip. And you're all annoying. From this distance, Naruto could see the sinister smile that covered the older boy's face. And I just want to break you in half. Just a few more seconds, Konohamaru, Naruto thought silently to himself. Even if it does show me up, it was bound to happen eventually, and this Suna nin is serious. First I'll take care of this one. He pulled back a fist, and then I'll take care of the Odash. The Suna nin was pushed a pace backward, a hand unconsciously going to his bleeding lip. Konohamaru scrambled back towards the group. Naruto! Sakura yelled, now aware of who had saved the younger boy. They are Shinobi Naruto. Come back, Kensuke yelled, his eyes wide, not with excitement or happiness, but fear. You should listen to them, you know. Punk. The purple markings on the boy's face made his stare twisted. Uzumaki Naruto. Why do I want to know your name? The blonde shrugged. It's customary for the loser to know who beat him. The Suna nin laughed. The name Subaku no Kankuro. So he is one of the Kazukage's children. Kankuro looked down at the blonde boy, leaning in closer to whisper in the smaller boy's ear. And I'm a shinobi. Well, Naruto whispered back. Ever hear of the piercing wind? Naruto wished he could see the look that he knew crossed the Tsubaka's face. Piercing wind, it had been his ANBU moniker, but he had earned it in Sunagakure, in a SS rank mission to assassinate the head of the Suna ANBU, Yaramaki. Naruto whispered, his hand seal almost unseen. Kankuro began to cough, clutching at his throat, stepping backwards towards where his sister, Temari no Subaku, stood, a look of concern on her face. Naruto turned to his right, smiling at the red head who hung from a tree branch. Gaara no Subaku. He nodded and turned towards Sakura and Kensuke. Sasuke Uchiha stayed where he was on the branch of the tree, rock poised for throwing. Had that been a hand seal Naruto had used? Gaara reappeared in a swirl of sand next to his siblings. You're an embarrassment to the village, Kankuro, the redhead said, his voice devoid of any emotion but hate. You were defeated by a civilian. Naruto suddenly saw the danger. If Gaara found out that Kankuro was under a genjutsu, forming the seals discreetly, he whispered Kai softly. Kankuro coughed once more, before taking in what felt to him like his first clean breath. We'll be going now, Gaara said quietly. Wait! Sakura yelled, do you have permission to enter the village? Of course, Temari laughed. Don't you know what's happening? Well, Kensuke started. Of course. The Chunin exams. Naruto thought Kakashi hasn't told them about it. It's the Chunin exams, punk, Kankuro told them, leering at the younger genin. Chunin? Exams? Kensuke turned to Sakura. Do you know what it is, Sakura-chan? For once the pinkette didn't hit him. Temari grinned at her brother. They have no clue. Turning back to the group, she sneered. We'll see you there. Better hope you're not against us. Gaara stood silently, staring, but not at either of the genin. He was staring directly at Naruto. The Ichibi, Shukaku. Naruto sighed. The bloodlust is just far too obvious. The Sand sibling turned and began to walk away, without so much as even a farewell. Wait! Sasuke shouted, jumping down from his previous perch. Your name? Who, me? Temari blushed deeply. Well, I'm Dash. Not you, Sasuke cut off, then pointed at the red-head him. Subaku no Gaara. The boy with the ringed eyes replied. And you? Uchiha Sasuke. The Konohamaru Corps had gone home, and Team 7 was lounging around the training ground waiting for their sensei. Sasuke wouldn't stop staring at him now. Even when Naruto looked up, he refused to make eye contact. Stop looking at me. The Uchiha kept staring. Stop staring. The Uchiha blinked, and Naruto relaxed a little. What's the deal, Kakashi-senpai? 11:10. The Uchiha got up and walked over. Can I talk to you a moment, please, Uzumaki? Naruto got to his feet. Sure, Uchiha. Over there. Sasuke pointed to the woods privately. Why, Uchiha? Naruto fluttered his eyelashes suggestively. I never knew you liked me like that. Get serious. Sure. What was that back there? The Uchiha asked, concern visible in his slate-gray eyes. What the joke? Naruto laughed good-naturedly. It was only a joke, Uchiha. No, back when you confronted the Suna nin. What about it? Naruto asked, outwardly, his face only showed puzzlement. But inside his head was working at 100 miles an hour. Damn all uchas and their goddamn intellect. Your hand, it looked like a hand seal for a genjutsu. An A-rank genjutsu. Really? Naruto frowned. I don't remember doing anything like that. Perhaps you didn't see right. He would give up the game eventually. But he would not let the ucha win this one. Not now. Now that's more like an ucha. I'll keep an eye on you, Uzumaki. He stalked off, leaving the blonde alone in the clearing. Sure you will, Sasuke. A grin crossed his face. Sure you will. He followed the ucha back to the training ground. This will be interesting. Where is he? Kensuke whined, plucking repeatedly at the grass by his feet. Team 7 and Naruto sat around the training ground, waiting for the perpetually late Jounin. Come on, senpai. I need to see what these kids can do. Naruto sat a little way from the genin, back rested against a nearby tree. He had to say, he was pretty surprised that the ucha wasn't training already with the amount of times he had come back from night patrol and come across the child training with Kaiten Jutsus. He remembered being vaguely impressed at the power of the jutsus the academy student had produced. Did Itachi-senpai ever teach him the dash dot? The ucha stood up abruptly, cutting the blonde's train of thought. Why should we wait for him? Sakura leapt to her feet, eager to agree with the dark-eyed boy. Yeah. Naruto resisted the temptation to roll his eyes. He was sure that if Sakura stood on her own 2 feet just once, she would be a more than proficient kunoichi. We should train. Kensuke added, pulling himself from the patch of ground where he had been sitting. But Sakura looked around the empty clearing. Perhaps ninjutsu would be a bit too much, if anyone got too badly hurt. Naruto gained a little more respect for the apparently airheaded genin. The ucha was not amused. If I didn't know any better. Naruto grinned. I would have thought the ucha was annoyed. So taijutsu then? Kensuke asked, looking from Sasuke to Sakura. I suppose. The ucha shrugged. Naruto saw the flicker of fear in Sakura's eyes. So I guess taijutsu isn't a strong point for her. Sakura. He called, come over here and explain what they're doing. She smiled, obviously grateful for the excuse to sit out, and ran towards the tree, sitting in the grass next to Naruto. Well, taijutsu is hand-to-hand combat. He drowned her out, nodding every so often if he needed to. And Kensuke uses a style called Kabushi no Mai. Naruto smiled. So Tora-chan had taught Kensuke her own style? It couldn't have been better. And Sasuke-kun. She trailed off, a small frown on her face. I don't know, but it will beat Kensuke. The blonde sighed, but a smile was still on his. Were problems, but they would be easy to iron out. He understood why Kakashi had passed the team. Ready? Kensuke asked, innocent eyes staring in the ucha's direction. I should ask you the same thing. Kensuke grinned, then sliding his right foot into stance, bringing his hands up into a defensive position. The ucha stood, staring. Sighing, Kensuke rolled his eyes. Do you ever strike the first blow, Sasuke? Kensuke covered the ground between them in a few seconds, fist poised ready for striking. The ucha dodged to his left, avoiding the aimed fist with ease, before returning a blow of his own to Kensuke's rib. The younger of the two boys regained his breath, before sliding his foot back. Still not good enough. Kensuke is a proficient taijutsu user. His attacks are usually well aimed. Kakashi had sighed. His style is lacking something. He added it to his mental list of things to do, but didn't take his eyes off the two genin. There was something that just said that not everything was being shown. The ucha ran towards the other boy, and Naruto winced in pain as the ucha's fist connected, followed by a foot, and then a roundhouse kick that sent Kensuke flying to the ground. Spitting blood, Kensuke got back to his feet. It's getting a bit rough for genin, isn't it? Kensuke forward, the smaller boy connected a hit, but the next was blocked by an annoyed-looking ucha, who sent the boy sprawling for the third time. The blonde under the tree realized there were two problems. One was Kensuke. He was good at the style, but it had been invented for an ANBU by an ANBU, not for a genin who didn't have enough speed or power to complete the attacks. Perhaps he could teach Kensuke a different way to use the style. The second was the ucha. Did people just let him win? It made his fists itch just thinking about it. He hissed as Kensuke missed a valuable opening in Sasuke's defense, and was surprised when Sakura hissed too. She saw it. Kensuke laid back, stretching his bruised and battered limbs out on the grass. So you enjoyed it, Naruto? The boy asked the blonde. Yeah, it was cool. Sasuke was stood still, waiting for their sensei to arrive. Naruto frowned. Teamwork was important. Why did the Uchiha never join in? You remember Aunt Naruki? He turned back to Kensuke, wondering where this conversation was going. She told me about the team she heard of. He lowered his voice to a whisper in ANBU. Oh no, Tora-chan. Please say. Naruto thought. Kensuke nodded sagely, like it was a top-secret matter. Go on. Naruto said, not liking the turn the conversation had taken. Well, she told me, about a young boy who was one of the elite. He was called He looked left and right Kitsune. Tora-chan. You are so dead. And he was a really good ninja. Rumor has it that he was next in line to be Hokage, and then he disappeared. Does anyone know what happened? Sakura asked, interested. Aunt Naruki said that he lives in Konoha still, but as a normal civilian. He left. Kensuke nodded. Obasan said that Kitsune was the best she had ever seen, and Obasan is good. Kitsune. Sasuke whispered, and Naruto's ears pricked up. I think I met him once. You did? Oh wow, Sasuke-kun. You're so cool. Kensuke looked a little deflated. When did you meet him, Uchiha? Naruto asked, hoping that the Uchiha wouldn't notice the edge to his voice. Why should you care? Naruto shrugged, looking away, just interested. There was a silence. He knew my brother. I think. He hoped the genin wouldn't press the topic any further. If the Uchiha remembered too much. Sure, he had planned to give up the game at some point. But if the wrong people knew he was alive, it could end up very badly for a lot of people. Not just for him. What was he like, Sasuke-kun? I don't really remember. He had a white mask. With he ran 4 fingers down the center of his face for red stripes down the middle, and the usual ANBU uniform. I remember finding it odd that he was the same height as me. Curse all Uchihas. Naruto growled. He was the same height. Kensuke frowned, wincing as the expression caused a bruise on his chin to flare up in pain. So was he just short? Or was he young? Like, really, really young? The genin sat and or stood respectively, wondering silently about the identity of Kitsune, whilst Naruto sat, fuming. Not that you would have guessed from his expression. Yo! Kakashi winced, as he looked into 2 murderous cerulean blue eyes. This is not going to end well. You're late. Kensuke and Sakura yelled, pointing accusing fingers at the extremely late sensei. I'll be more than late when Naruto is through, Kakashi thought. He. The silver-haired jounin rubbed the back of his head. I got lost. On the road of life. The 3 genin deadpanned. Sure, sensei. Kensuke sighed. Sure. The midday heat was stifling, but Team 7 had just rested under the shade of the trees. Do you know about Kitsune, Kakashi-sensei? Kensuke asked. Naruto suppressed a groan. What had the kid got against him? Well, I met him a few times, the older man admitted. Really? What was he like? Sakura asked, and Naruto noticed that Sasuke also sat up a little taller. Well, he was certainly good at what he did. But what did he look like, sensei? Kensuke interrupted. None of us know. Naruto wanted the earth to open up and swallow him. What is with these kids and their obsession? I don't know either. I only saw him when he was very young. Kakashi shrugged. He is sure to have changed by now. Naruto let his breath out, completely unaware he had been holding it. How old would he be now then? Sasuke asked, surprising the other members of Team 7. He would be your age. What? All 3 members turned to Kakashi in shock. Our age. The jounin nodded. He was ANBU. Before we even joined the academy. Kakashi nodded again. Does anyone know where he is? Sakura asked. He still lives in Konoha apparently. Kakashi shrugged. Not many people know where. Do you? Sasuke said in words what the other 2 genin were thinking, or on the verge of saying. Well. The jounin looked over at Naruto, who was glaring like a sharp battle-ready kunai. But the Koppanin carried on as if nothing was wrong. Some say that he hangs around in the Forest of Death every full moon, but that's just old gossip. Naruto groaned as he realized that each of the genin had the full intention of going to see if the rumor was true. The full moon was tomorrow. Yet the Forest of Death was dangerous to genin. Hell, even most jounin were at risk from some of the things that inhabited that deadly forest. Naruto waited until the genin had gone home in order to vent his frustration. Why the hell'd you do that? Naruto yelled, his cerulean eyes no longer calm, but like a thrashing river, fists clenched. All memories of the time. They need training, what better way? He said offhandedly, Itcha book open, scanning pages. Look at me when I'm speaking to you, the blonde hissed, wrenching the book from the Jounin's grasp, throwing it to the floor. Why should I? The silver-haired Jounin snapped, for once losing his legendary indifference. Grey, I like steel, you're a nobody. By your own choice. The two stood silently, facing each tension was almost palpable, and Kakashi had a feeling that it wouldn't be long before blows were traded. He had absolutely no desire to test out Naruto's skills after 2 years of withdrawal from the Black Ops, since the blonde boy could have easily beaten him before. Sighing, he slouched. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. And he really was. No, it's all right. It was silly of me to overact, senpai. The blonde had his head in his hands. Kakashi crouched and grabbed the orange-bound book from its precarious position on the ground by their feet, placing it back in his kunai pouch, and then drew something out. Naruto's breath hitched in his throat. That? It's only for a night, but you can be Kitsune again. Kakashi said quietly, it's nothing official. No missions, just. But all Naruto could hear was his heart pounding as he reached out for the all-too-familiar ANBU mask. 4 red lines ran down vertically from forehead to chin. Kitsune. The Hokage gave it to me. Kakashi explained as Naruto took the mask from his outstretched fingers. He told me he remembered a time when you said that you would never take it off. I said that? I suppose I did. He ran his fingers down the red stripes. There were too many memories he had forced himself to forget related to the mask. The porcelain surface was still as smooth as it had ever been, looking almost as clean as when he had first seen it. But a small fracture on the bottom length of the mask convinced him it was the original. The last time he had seen this, it had been discarded at the feet of the Sandaime, and its clean white surface had been covered with drying blood. Flipping it over, he traced the faint lettering on the inside. From Tora, Yama, Ainu, and Kei. Good luck in ANBU Kitsune. The faces flashed through his mind as his hands passed over each of the names. Kei, Naruto doubted he would ever see his face again. Yama would never be teased by Tora again. Ainu, but he was no longer Ainu. Kakashi had moved on with his life. Tora was still Tora, the last of the 4, her smile still as vibrant, her teasing just as present as they ever were. Everyone had moved on. Why hadn't he? Had he been so focused on forgetting the past? He had become a part of it? Just once. He whispered, his eyes shutting wearily, his hand dropping to his side. Without him, the genin could die in that forest. He hadn't known any of them for that long. Yet somehow they had just inserted themselves into his life. Twisting on his heels, he left the silver-haired Jounin alone in the training ground. Kakashi turned, facing the Hokage monument. But instead of looking at the usual face, he turned to the Sandaime. See, I told you he would take it back. The Hokage had heard about Naruto's life since he had left the Black Ops, and had asked Kakashi help him. He hoped that it had at least made a little difference. He stared at it. It stared back. It was a never-ending staring competition. On the bed next to the ever-staring mask, lay his ninjato. It had been there when he had got back home from the training ground, placed on top of his sheets, gleaming like it had just been cleaned. He hadn't touched it yet. It had stayed where it had been set down. Why am I doing this? He thought wearily, resisting the urge to curl up and forget anything and everything that had happened that day. Why am I going back to the life I left? He had no answer, not yet. Next to it laid an old-issue ANBU uniform, like the type he used to wear, but significantly bigger than the last. 2 years was long enough to grow out of something. More than long enough. There were other things on his mind, racing through at the speed of light. I might not be any help, after 2 years. Things are forgotten easily. With that thought, an uncomfortable amount of fear ran through him, causing him to clench his eyes shut and breathe out sharply. I won't let them die. He would have to train. Just to see if he could help them. They needed to be trained. They needed to survive the Chunin exams. He would not let them die. The rustle of the uniform was nearly painful, as he put it on, yet soothing, almost hypnotic, others might have said. The ninjato was firmly placed on his back, the hilt over his right shoulder, its weight as comforting as the sound of the uniform. He stood there for a while, staring at the unemotional, striped mask in his hands, the ties hanging limply in his grasp. Doubts ran through his head. Suspicions. Second thoughts. What if the Hokage forced him to rejoin the Black Ops? What if that day repeated itself? His knuckles turned white as his fingers dug into the white porcelain. He knew then that he would never rejoin ANBU. It would destroy what little sanity he had managed to grab a hold of. But I won't let them die, he whispered, placing the cool mask over his face. He let out a deep breath. In a blink he was gone. The window swung on its hinges as if seeing the boy off, waving a forlorn goodbye. Kitsune. It was so easy to fall back into that character. Even if he was as much Kitsune as Kitsune was him. Yet Kitsune was the ever-alert, stoic ANBU. Naruto was the boy who lived on his own in his own apartment. They were different people. The wind rushed past as he ran along the rooftops, racing the other shinobi that used the highway. He had missed this, the freedom to be whatever he wanted. Casting a glance around, he noticed there was a distinct lack of ANBU patrolling the rooftops. Kitsune shrugged. The rules were sure to have changed in the time he had left. Now that he was back, he would have to look them up. He was currently heading west, towards the larger, unused training grounds. Training Ground 1. It was one of the largest, but also the furthest from Konoha. In case he practiced anything too drastic, he would have to sneak through the other training grounds to get there. The taller buildings were replaced by smaller houses, probably a civilian quarter. The wind carried an interesting scent, like 1,000 flowers. He peered down into the street, suddenly curious where the otherworldly smell was coming from. Yamanoka Flower Shop. As in, Yamanoka Inoichi. He suppressed a laugh. The last time he had seen Inoichi was when the blonde jounin had been interrogating a man suspected of being an Iwa spy. It had taken the Yamanoka about 3 minutes to render the Iwa nin to a jittering pile, having spilled his life story to the blonde jounin, and revealed his purpose in Konoha. A man like that owned a flower shop? He stopped for a moment. Kitsune sat on the edge, his feet dangling over the rooftop. 13 years and he had never seen this street before. There were only a few people on this street, going about their own business, but 4 figures caught his attention. Shikamaru sighed. Troublesome. Next to him, Chuji was busy emptying the 1,000th bag of chips, not even offering any to his teammates. Not that they really cared. Asuma took a drag of his perpetually present cigarette, the smell of smoke lingering around him. Aino wrinkled her nose. Sensei. She wafted a hand in front of her, in a vain attempt to clear the haze of smoke. The smell stays in my hair for days, the blonde whined. The bearded jounin shrugged. Chuji finished the packet he had been eating and pulled out the next packet, then continued to eat. Shikamaru sighed again. It had been a long day. He had been told about their nomination for the Chunin exams, trained a bit, ignored Aino and stared at clouds. And now they were finished, and like they did every other day, walk Aino back to the flower shop. Something caught his eye. He looked up to the rooftops. There was a tiny flicker of movement. He was sure that the tiny flicker he had seen had been a foot. He glanced back at his team, wondering if they had seen it too. Aino was too busy complaining about everything, and Chuji was too busy doing what he always did, eat. But Asuma was also looking at the rooftop. But what puzzled Shikamaru was the faint smile on his lips. What's going on? Asuma looked down in surprise, and then smiled at Shikamaru's expression. It would be too troublesome. Believe me, Shikamaru. So there is something going on. But what? The Noro sighed again, digging his hands deep into his pockets. At least Aino was home now. How troublesome. So that had been one of the other genin teams? Kitsune was already in Training Ground 3, having to pass through this one and Training Ground 2 to get where he wanted to go. Training Ground 3 was an area of dense woodland, usually used by the academy for their older students and occasionally the odd genin team. Some people said it was where the Shodame trained. Not that Kitsune believed any of it, but he supposed it was a nice thought. He imagined that if the Shodame had practiced here, the Mokuton user would have liked the trees. Talking of the trees, they were much closer now than they had been when he had first entered the training ground, making hopping from tree branch to tree branch increasingly more difficult. He just hoped he didn't slip, because that would just be plain embarrassing. He was glad that the training ground was smaller than most, but the limited vision with the mask firmly in place was beginning to bug him. He couldn't remember if it had annoyed him before, or if it had just never bothered him. At least the forest would end. Then he remembered what Training Ground 2 was, and Kitsune had a horrible feeling that the genin would run him ragged around the forest of death tomorrow evening. Yes, he would have a nice, possibly painful conversation with his senpai after this was all over. And Tora-chan as well, for giving Kensuke the goddamn idea. She kept running as fast as she could. It was all she could do to stay ahead of them. But even as she ran, her mind raced through all the tactics she could to defeat them. When she finally gave up on running away, or they finally caught up with her. She sensed someone in front of her before she actually saw him, sat above the forest floor on a tree branch ahead. Blinking, she realized that the figure sat in front of her was a Black Ops member. Hinata stopped, hoping that the ANBU hadn't noticed her yet. It was rare she ever got to see an ANBU member close up like this. She had always been fascinated by ANBU since a very young age, after she was saved by a Black Ops member after an attempted kidnap by a Kumo-nin. Her eyes traced the manner of sunshine yellow hair. And suddenly he turned. Startled cerulean blue eyes met startled lavender eyes. And then vanished. Hinata didn't move, even when Kiba and Shino found her. Damn it. Kitsune cursed. I stopped twice and get spotted by Genin. If he had thought falling out of a tree was embarrassing, this was infinitely times worse. By Genin, he mentally yelled at himself, slightly angered. He was now in the largest clearing of Training Ground 1, stood patiently still. The masked blonde sighed. There was nothing he could do about it now. Plus, he had more important things on his mind. Toju Koge Bunshin no Jutsu. The clearing was suddenly full of clones dressed up in ANBU gear, Kitsune mask on each and every one. He was remotely surprised that he could even use the technique after all this time. He was suddenly extremely grateful to the Sandaime for teaching him the jutsu. It would cut his training time by roughly half. Right, listen up. This is how it goes dash. Kitsune winced as all the clones dispersed, making his brain work overtime to remember everything they had relearned. An almost full moon hung over the clearing, bathing it a soft light, making the blonde feel even more exhausted. Perhaps he had overdone it. Just a little. Placing his ninjato back over his shoulder, he sighed. Less than 24 hours until he would have to play nanny to 3 unprepared genin. There was no way he was gonna last the night without soldier pills. He would have to pester his senpai for some later, as soon as he managed to find the strength to get back to Konoha. I guess you overdid it, her Kitsune. You dash. He was cut off by a glomp. Kitsune flew backwards through the air, caught by surprise with the unannounced flying glomp, and then hit the floor with an all-too-audible crunch. You look so cute, Kitsune-kun. Tora was completely oblivious to the amount of killing intent that was rolling off the smaller masked figure, too busy squealing in delight. Oh, look at you. It's so cute. Kitsune gritted his teeth, as it took all of his energy just to stay upright. There would be no way he could throw Tora off. He would just have to bear it until she finally got over seeing him. Which, knowing Tora, would be an unbelievable amount of time later. So why are you here, Tora-chan? Kitsune asked, after she had finally let him go. Well, were you following me? She laughed again. You're the insane one using bunshins to train. She stuck her tongue out at him and waggled her finger silly. And then he suddenly remembered. He groaned and flopped to the floor. Why didn't I remember earlier? He groaned. It would have saved me all this time. Naruki's speciality was a rare type of ninjutsu, similar to the Yamanaka technique, except it forced the victim to relieve their own memories, leaving them incapable to defend themselves during a battle. He could have just relieved his training memories, without all the exhaustion that came with the actual training. Well. She looked around the decimated clearing, the destroyed trees, scorched and crater-filled ground. Naruto looked up from his depressed huddle on the floor. She winked. I don't think you need my help with anything, Kitsune. But if you want to take a look. Tora left the sentence hanging, waiting for an answer from the worn-out boy in front of her. Please. Ninpu. Senkaito no Jutsu. The Sandaime laughed for the 1000th time that day. No Naruto-kun. He leant down closer towards the tiny blonde and repositioned his hands, much to the boy's displeasure. See? If you get sloppy with your hand seals. Naruto scowled. I'll show you one day, Gigi. The blonde vowed. Of course. The old man yet again, but your hand slipped again. Naruto's scowl deepened. Kitsune-kun. You were so adorable. Tora squealed. Kitsune scowled, much like his younger, 3-year-old self. I don't think this will get us anywhere. I can remember this stuff. Sporal sport, Tora pouted. Right Gaki, chakra control. Jiraiya sat in front of a still tiny Naruto. Neruki. Kitsune growled. But. He sent her a death glare and she sighed. Fine. Have it your way, almighty master. The Sandaime reached for a smallish black box, covered in black velvet, and handed it to the serious-looking blonde-haired boy in front of him. Go on. Open it. Naruto carefully opened the box, peering inside, wondering about the mysterious contents. He reached in and pulled out a stark white ANBU mask, for red stripes running from forehead to chin. Well done, Naruto-kun. The Hokage laughed. You're now a part of ANBU. Naruto looked up suddenly, his previous somber demeanor all but vanished, huge grin covering his face. Thanks, Gigi. I'll never take it off. An ANBU with a dog mask appeared at the Hokage's side. This is Ainu. The Hokage motioned. He will be your mentor for the next year. Ainu removed his porcelain mask and smiled kindly at the blonde, who smiled nervously back. I'm Ainu. He held out a hand, feeling a little stupid introducing himself again, after the Hokage had already introduced him. But he didn't know how to act around children. Whatever he had done though had been the right thing to do. The small blonde grabbed the older teen's hand, and smile grew. Kitsune, the next Hokage. Tora turned to the blonde, who was still sat in the dirt next to her, concerned. It's all right, he smiled. Nothing like the childish grin he had worn in times past, but a weary, grief-ridden smile, a washout. Perhaps send it forward a couple of years. Our mission is this. Kei started, carefully making sure each member of his team heard the mission brief. In an S-class mission it was vital. We need to retrieve a scroll stolen from Konoha a few hours ago. We know that it is traveling southeast in a trading caravan heading for the borders of Kei's no Kuni. Kitsune nodded. He had been on many missions by now. Very little of the carefree child from 3 years ago was left. Kei continued. We are to retrieve the scroll. Do not hesitate to kill any that get in the way of your mission. Hi! 2 members of the group stood, but the third remained crouched next to Kei. Does that mean we try to avoid contact at all costs, senpai? Neither spoke. There was only silence, broken by birdsong every so often. It was known between them that neither liked mindless violence. They did what they were told and that was it. One stood up and began to walk towards the other 2. Kitsune. The still crouching boy stood up and walked over to the blonde, then handed him something. A small, tightly bound scroll. It's a few Kaiten techniques I thought you might like. Kei shrugged. You don't have to learn them if you don't want. Arigato, senpai. Kitsune scanned the scroll before putting it into the pocket of his uniform. Anything useful? Tora asked, beginning to think it might have been a bad idea. She didn't want to drag it out any longer. Kitsune nodded. He had forgotten about that scroll. A little bit. But. He shrugged his shoulders a little. I need to rest. Tora nodded. She had known the boy had pushed himself further than he should have. Come on. She held out a hand to pull the boy of the ground. I'll take you home. A few seconds later, the near-destroyed clearing was empty. This was it then. Kitsune watched the 3 genin disappear over the poorly guarded fence and into the forest. He wondered how the Chunin, who was supposed to be watching for intruders, missed them. Not my problem. He sighed, then pulled his mask down onto his face, before following after them. Nothing would happen to them, not while he was there. Myth and folklore. Sakura clutched at her skirt, hoping that the 2 boys in front of her didn't notice how she lagged behind slightly. Those 2 were always leaving her behind. A twig snapped. What was that? She spun to her right, her heart pounding rapidly. Is something wrong, Sakura-chan? Kensuke had stopped and turned back towards her. Sasuke had kept on walking. And nothing. I thought I heard something over there. She gestured feebly to her right, her hand shaking. He turned to where the pinkette had pointed, and when he was sure there was nothing there, turned back to her. Whatever it was, it's gone now. He smiled. And we better catch up to Sasuke. He might just find Kitsune without us. She bit her lip, and then followed after her teammates. Where are those 2? Both Kensuke and Sakura had stopped further back, and the fact that they hadn't reappeared had begun to annoy the Ucha. Why did he have to be on a team like this? How would he ever gain enough power to kill his brother if his team might as well have stayed in the academy? Sasuke sighed as he heard the noisy footfalls of his 2 teammates approaching. At this rate, they would never find Kitsune, if Kakashi had even been telling the truth. The thing about the once every full moon? How much more cliché could you get? His sensei was up to something. If only he knew what. Hey, Sasuke-kun. Sakura yelled, wait up. The Ucha sighed. I had to get stuck on a team like this. Kitsune hopped onto the next branch, keeping a watchful eye on the 3. So far there had been nothing out of the usual, not anything to be worried about anyway. The forest hadn't changed much from the last time he was here. The same old boring trees, plants and dirt. Looking at it now, the Forest of Death didn't seem a very suitable name. He wondered why the genin even wanted to find him. What did they want from him? The masked blonde shook his head slightly, clearing his thoughts. I really am out of practice, however much I try to ignore the fact. One night of training and a few memories wouldn't be enough to bring back everything he had forgotten. He would have to retrain. He would have to go there and pick up his old kit. He hadn't been there since. A noise. He glanced left to right, but he felt no other presence other than the 3 genin on the forest floor below him. But even if he was out of practice, the blonde kept his mind trained to the task at hand. You know, you really should lighten up a bit. The dark-haired man glared at the young redhead, itching to strangle the other man, or at least shut him up for once. It's patrol duty, not a frickin' picnic shinku. He retorted, hoping the young man would finally shut up. The redhead, Shinku, pouted. But dash, he began to whine. Shut up, shut up. Shinku shrank back, eyes suddenly fearful, and his mouth, for once, clamped shut. The dark-haired man stood, grabbing his katana from where it rested against the post. Stay here. He hissed furiously, I'm going to patrol the area. He stalked off into the inky black forest. Kitsune could feel the effect of the pills begin to wear off, and shrugged his shoulders to keep off the ache. He hoped Team 7 would give up soon, but he had his doubts. He guessed that Kensuke wanted to find Kitsune because he knew his aunt. Sasuke probably wanted to find Kitsune because he knew Itachi, and Sakura wanted to find Kitsune because everybody else wanted to. If he ever got around to helping Team 7, he knew exactly what he would help them with. Another sigh. A penny for every time he sighed and he would be rich. Not that he didn't have enough money. He had an account, and it held a lot more than one might expect when you looked at his tiny, rather shabby-looking house. Since that day he had never touched it. Since all the money there had been earned on missions, it was dirty money. It was money covered in blood. Jiraiya had argued long and hard with the boy to use the money, but in the end he had given up. He had said that even his father had never been as stubborn. So Jiraiya let him earn money via his job at the books. Muffled footsteps. The genin? No, they were to his right now, and the noise had come from his left. He dropped off the branch and landed without a sound on the forest floor. Only shinobi came into the forest of death. Why would they have the need to suppress their chakra so low that he didn't notice it while he was distracted? Or perhaps your skills have dulled. Not likely. He hadn't forgotten simple stuff like that. Whoever it was, they were suppressing their chakra levels incredibly low. He crept silently towards the faint sound of footsteps. They were slowly moving away from him, towards the genin. Kitsune cursed. He had thought that it would have been a relatively easy job. But, cursing once more, he picked up the pace, following the direction of the stranger's footsteps. Chances could be it was just an ANBU or Jounin on patrol, but he couldn't take that chance. Kensuke. The boy stopped just behind Sasuke, a quizzical look on his face. Sakura stood close behind, her jade eyes full of fear. The forest of death was no walk in the park. Had the Ucha seen something? Kensuke nodded, eyes shifting left and right, glancing into the shadows that surrounded them. They would find Kitsune. There was no going back now. A figure, silhouetted in the silvery shadows of the full moon, and a brief moment of déjà vu hit Kitsune. He was sure he had seen this moment before, but he shook the thought clear. One thing was clear, the figure in front of him was not a Konoha shinobi. His Hitayate had a musical symbol, shuriken poised for throwing. Aimed at the genin. Get down! Sasuke yelled, forcing both Kensuke and Sakura sprawling to the ground as they heard the sound of throwing stars flying past overhead. Sakura whimpered. The Ucha leapt up, running straight for the direction from which the shuriken had been thrown, a kunai already in hand. Kensuke called him back, it was too reckless, but Sasuke didn't want to hear it. He didn't need their help. The Ucha's kunai flew off into the bushes recklessly, followed by a Kaiten jutsu. Damn it, Ucha! A voice growled from the darkness and Sasuke faltered. A body flew out of the shadows, flying towards the paralyzed genin. Kensuke, strangely, was the first to react. Move! All three ducked as the body flew over their heads, colliding with a huge, overgrown tree behind them, before collapsing awkwardly to the ground. Wincing Kitsune got to his feet, dodging shuriken that embedded themselves in the bark where his heart had been mere seconds before. The Otonin stepped into the light, grinning ferally at the 3 genin, before his attention turned back to Kitsune, who was stood completely still, the blank eye socket staring. You think I would think you're ANBU just because you're dressed up like one? The Otonin barked, eyes shining maliciously in the silky moonlight, his hands devoid of any weapons. But there was a katana at his waist, and no doubt had other weapons hidden in the folds of his clothes. The genin turned, suddenly aware that they were in a very, very dangerous situation. and somehow in the middle of all the danger, had managed to stumble across Kitsune. Silly little boy. The dark-haired man shook his head. Black eyes narrowed. You're about 11? 12. Kitsune bristled, making the Otonin bark with laughter once again. Well, don't think I'm just gonna let you get away with it. I'm gonna kill you and your little fried sh. He was cut off by a chuckle. The Otonin was surprised to see it came from the masked boy. It's true you caught me off guard before. Kitsune started, reaching to the hilt of the ninjato, fingers closing around the tsuka. It won't happen again. Why did the masked boy seem so sure of his success? He was a genin at most. At least he's underestimating me. Kitsune thought, drawing the ninjato rapidly, before letting the blade rest at his side. Your death will be painful. I won't lie to you and say it won't. Kitsune slid a foot slightly to one side, finding his center of gravity. You caused me to break a promise to myself. Sasuke stepped forwards, kunai in hand, sharing in glowing red as he stared hatefully at the Otonin. This isn't your fight, Ucha. Kitsune growled, cursing all Uchiha's stubbornness. Kensuke, get everybody out of the way. The blonde genin looked terrified, his green eyes wide in fear, but he nodded, grabbing both Sakura and Sasuke before disappearing into the tree line. When I'm finished with you, I'll go after them. They won't get far. I'll pick them off one by one. After I'm done, nobody will ever be able to recognize their blooded core. The Otonin made a mistake. He threatened those Kitsune had vowed to protect. Shut up. Kitsune covered the distance in a blink of an eye, and the only thing that saved the Otogakure shinobi was years of ingrained reflexes, his katana blocking what would have been a fatal hit. He pushed the blade upwards, forcing the ANBU away from him. His mind flicked through the dozens of tactics that he had learnt over the years, but he had yet to see what the boy could do. Yet the Otonin should have never looked away. Suetun. Suiryuden no Jutsu. Kitsune still had his hands locked in the bird seal when the water surged upwards, gathering in the shape of a huge dragon that coiled around his body. Before the creature let out an ear-splitting roar, the water swirling and hissing violently. How had the boy even had the time to finish the jutsu? That particular jutsu had many hand seals. How had a genin managed to complete them all in such a short time? Kaiten. Ryuka no Jutsu. Flames flew to counter the colossal water dragon, leaving the dark clearing full of steam, moisture sticking to his skin, like another layer of clothing. Something sharp dug into his neck, and blood trickled down the hollow of his throat, gathering in the material of his fishnet shirt. You forced me to do this. The ANBU kid whispered harshly into his ear, no compassion or childishness present in his tone. It was as emotional as stone. The blade was removed for a moment, and the Otonin thought for a moment that his life had been spared. Uzumaki Naruto was your killer. The boy whispered venomously, remember this in the afterlife. The blade descended gracefully, meeting little resistance, red life liquid spurting in all directions, dampening the fabric of his shirt, sticking to the white porcelain mask. He had broken the last promise, to not kill another living thing. Kitsune bowed his head. And I hope you never forgive me. The steam cleared, leaving the still corpse in plain sight, blood already pooling beneath the motionless figure. The once grey shirt now entirely red, dark eyes staring vacantly at the full moon. He bent down, placing a finger on each of his fallen enemy's eyelids. He dragged them down, closing the empty orbs for the last time. You can come out now. He motioned to the genin, it's safe. The masked figure stood and turned towards Team 7, moonlight reflecting off the bone-white mask, marred slightly by the dripping liquid that covered the lower left half. But 4 red lines could be clearly seen running from forehead to chin. Red spiked hair was visible behind the mask. The ninjato was slid back into its sheath with a tiny click noise, bringing the 3 genin back to their senses. Cautiously they stepped forwards. "Are-you-k Kitsune?" Sakura asked, finally finding the courage to speak. Even though she stuttered as badly as Hinata did, she considered it an achievement since neither of the 2 boys had moved to speak first. There was a sigh. I suppose I am. It had been half an hour since he had saved them from the Otonin, and so far all they had done was ask questions. Even the Ucha had put his 2 cents worth into the conversation. This, quite frankly, was worrying. Where do you live? Why did you leave? What happened? What's your name? He was glad they hadn't recognized him. The hastily placed henge made sure they didn't. But the noise they were making was giving him a headache, and he was still on the lookout for any enemy nin approaching. But it seemed not even the animals, that usually inhabited the forest, were present. He would have to tell his senpai, or even the sandame if things got worse. Kitsune hadn't talked to the third since that day, since he told the old man that he quit. Almost every rule he had forced to himself to follow had been broken now, shattered. He had told himself never to use jutsus again, under any circumstances, to never commit an act of violence, to not kill, to find a peaceable solution to every conflict, to never carry a weapon, to never associate himself with the ninja of Konoha. He had used jutsus, he had killed the Otonin without even speaking to the man, with a weapon he had been carrying, to protect the genin of Team 7. Kitsune sighed. "Fight me," the Ucha demanded, standing to his feet. Kensuke frowned, wide eyes flicking between the masked figure and his teammate. Fists clenched. He was worried and nervous yet didn't bother to hide it. He knew the outcome would not be in the Ucha's favor. Sakura bit her lip, focusing her entire attention on the raven-haired boy, also worried. "I always have wanted to knock some sense of humility into him," Kitsune thought. An unseen grin passed over Kitsune's face, the poor Ucha oblivious to his fate. Kensuke's frown darkened, his fists clenched so tight that the skin turned white, his green eyes as unforgiving as stone. But his glare was not directed at the ex-ANBU, but at the smirking Ucha. "When you're hurt, Sasuke, there's no sympathy from me." Tora's nephew scowled. "Kensuke." The pinkette flared. Her fist missed him by centimeters. "Don't say that about Sasuke-kun. He can beat Kitsune any day." "Fine, Ucha. Let's see if that Sharingan of yours can keep up." He was glad that Tora had been following him the night before. The scroll had helped more than he had expected it to do. There were a few jutsus he had never even remembered learning. He rolled his shoulders a little, ignoring the stiff muscles protesting. Even thinking about moving tomorrow made him groan in pain, but the Ucha mistook it. "Don't think I'll go easy on you." The raven smirked, his eyes glowing red as he activated the Sharingan. The two tomo visible even in the liquid moonlight as he slid back into the typical Ucha taijutsu stance. Unfortunately for the young Ucha, Kitsune knew the stance like the back of his hand. Kei wasn't his senpai for nothing, and after seeing the fight between Kensuke and Sasuke, he also knew exactly where the Ucha's weak, less guarded points were. The Ucha didn't pause a second, instead rushing forward with chakra-enhanced speed. Hands already partway through the seals for the Husenka no Jutsu. An A rank? Again. Kitsune sighed mentally. This bright spark needs a good hit to the head. Before Sasuke could finish his hand seal, he had to dodge Kitsune's Suetun, Daibakufu no Jutsu. The water surged upwards, pausing for a moment before heading towards the Ucha's jutsu, quenching the flames, leaving the Ucha in a sodden heap, unable to even get to his feet, after the water had crashed down full force on top of him. "I think you've had enough, Ucha." And with that, Kitsune turned and began to walk away. The boy had tried and failed. Second round was out of the question. "Don't turn your back on me," he heard the Ucha yell. He made a mental note to tell Kakashi to step up his training with the Sharingan. Kitsune stopped, glancing down at the prone boy. "Sasuke-kun." Having been silent till now, Sakura rushed from her hiding place, before crouching protectively over Sasuke. "How could you? Monster! You hurt Sasuke-kun." Kitsune flinched, old memories fluttering before fading away once more. He bowed his head. Perhaps he had gone too far. Sakura backed away, unsure of what the ex-shinobi would do. She had been told stories by her father about how almost everyone who joined the Black Ops never came back the same as when they had entered. This boy, could kill her and no one be would any wiser. He did ask for it, Sakura-chan, the Kensuke pointed out, much to the pinkette's distaste. Kitsune took a tentative step towards his fallen opponent, noting how Sakura tensed and reached for her kunai pouch. He held out his hand, and in it rested a small, round pill, the moonlight not to blame for its strange glow. "Take it. It will help him recover at least." She hesitated, unsure of what to do, but a glance at the Ucha, who still hadn't managed to get up from the floor, she reached for the pill. Kensuke had expected the ex-ANBU to take off, but instead, he sat down in a rather ungracious manner, before laying back, stretching his limbs out on the dirt, much like Kensuke had done after his fight with the Ucha. The mask slipped a little, and Tora's nephew jumped. Kitsune didn't even seem to notice the boy's curious stare as he nudged the mask back into place. But now Kensuke was even more curious. Kitsune's eyelids drooped momentarily. He knew he was dangerously near his limits of energy. He probably had enough to get back to Konoha, since the last soldier pill had been given to the Ucha, since the boy had been stubborn enough to stand in the way of the Suetun Jutsu. He had given the Ucha the chance to dodge the attack. But no, his pride had forced him to take the brunt of over 2 tons of unforgiving water. Stupid Ucha pride. Kitsune glanced around, wary for any more attacks. The Otonin had no reason to be in the Sho no Mori, and that's what worried him most. There was no reason to attack the genin either. It wasn't like they were even trespassing on Otogekia's soil, so he would have to tell the Hokage about this. When the genin were ready, he led them to the nearest exit, a point furthest away from any Chunin who could report them, and watched as the three figures disappeared into the night. Shanshin no Jutsu. He disappeared in a silent tornado of leaves. Dun Duyun Diuen. Why are there whole spaces between lines? Asterisk tears hair out asterisk. An Otonin, you're sure? Naruto nodded wearily, head held in his hands. Kakashi sighed, leaning back in the kitchen chair, obviously worried. I'll tell Sandame. Unless you want to go? The silver-haired man trailed off, suggesting that the boy should go and speak to the Hokage, but not saying it out loud. But both heard those unspoken words, both understanding. I suppose I could. He has a few of my things I need to get back. Kakashi fought the urge to smile. It seemed finally after all this time, they had managed to get through to him. Naruto yawned, stretching his tired arms above his head, lowering them slowly before letting them drop back to his sides. Will you be able to get back home in that condition? The Jounin asked, concerned by how fatigued the blonde appeared to be. I might. Naruto shrugged, uncaring I'm not sure. Kakashi chuckled, before standing from the chair he had been sat in and walking over to the spare bedroom door, nudging it open. It's all yours. Nobody else uses it anyway. Why did Senpai not own ramen? Naruto had searched every cupboard, but hadn't been able to find anything even remotely like ramen, just a stack of boring canned food. Every single cupboard was filled with the things, and Naruto was quickly losing what remained of his self-control. Feeling like he deserved an emotional breakdown after the night before, he left the house and wandered over to Ichiraku's, deciding that he could put the meal on his senpai's tab, since the man deserved it for not having any ramen in the house. I need to speak to the Hokage. The secretary peered over the bridge of his glass, giving the boy a once-over before his eyes dropped back to the paperwork he had been filling in before the civilian brat had interrupted him. I'm sorry. He's busy preparing for the Chunin exams. I need to see him. The damned brat hadn't moved an inch. I said, he's busy. For a moment, the secretary thought that the boy would leave, but instead the blonde leant forwards, a blank look on his face. Code in, SD 435, mission complete. The secretary sneered, but he typed in the code regardless. The boy had made the mistake to use an ANBU code. Who would have believed the boy was ANBU? Mission. Incomplete. The words glared red, and a quick glance at the date the mission was set told him it was an old mission, perhaps 2 or 3 years old. When he looked up, the boy had gone. He stood from his seat, eyes scanning the entrance for any sign of the strange boy, before his attention turned to the squad of ANBU. You didn't see a boy run towards the Hokage's office, did you? He asked worriedly. The boy could have been a spy. The ANBU shook their heads, and with that the secretary sat back down on his chair dejectedly. If the ANBU hadn't seen him, he must have given up and left. The man smirked. The boy had obviously run away after he had figured out that the code he had given in was a Black Ops mission code. What's up, Taicho? One of the ANBU asked. Uma his codename was. When that boy came in you got all weird, Tori added, her arms crossed, a frown obviously on her face, though hidden because of the mask. He. The captain of the team giggled. Taicho. The third member of the squad, Nezumi, added you are possibly the most insane person I have ever met. Ha ha ha. Tora collapsed in a fit of laughter, her mind briefly wondering why Naruto, after all this time, had finally decided to come and visit the Sandame. The three ANBU sweat dropped. Why did their captain have to be so damn insane? Naruto took a deep breath, chiding himself for ending so caught up in his senpai's plans. But he knew he had already given up and decided to go along with it. I think that part of me forced myself to go along with it. Wait, I sound as insane as Tora. He shook his head, then gently pushed open the door. It's been a while, Naruto-kun. You did what? The Hokage chuckled. I can't believe Sasuke-kun actually challenged you to a fight. He shook his head from side to side. Yeah, well, let's just hope he won't do it anytime soon. Naruto smiled. Before his face turned serious once more, there's no problem with Otogekior, is there? No reason for them to attack Konoha. The old man sighed, suddenly looking far older and more fragile than he had a few seconds before, tired eyes drooping closed for a second. Unfortunately, it's classified information. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Naruto grimaced, a look of pain crossing his face in a flash before disappearing, The last he had heard of Otogakure, it had been a fairly peaceful village. As far as he knew, there was no conflict between them and Konoha. That reminds me, Hokage-sama. Do you still have my equipment in the stores? The Sandame's eyebrows furrowed, obviously confused. But you said you never wanted to see those things again. Naruto interrupted him. I've said a lot of things. And broken many promises too. The professor opened the drawer, which contained a dark silver key, rust setting in at the base. Retrieving the sliver of metal, he laid it on his desk. Thank you, Hokage-sama. The boy began to stand, but was stopped. Wait a second, Naruto-kun. There's something else. Another key was handed over. The blue eyes boy cast a glance towards the smiling Hokage, who made a shooing movement with his hand. A present. Naruto knew better than to ask, so he left silently. The Hokage chuckled, before lighting his pipe and getting back to the never-ending paperwork. Surprisingly, the door opened easily. Naruto had half expected the door to be rusted shut, or at least a little hard to open, but the door opened with barely a noise. The three walls of the storage cell were covered with many different kinds of weapons, from kunai and shuriken to bows and swords. But most of them he never used anyway. There would be only so much he could carry. There was only one thing he came for, and he knew, even after all this time, exactly where he had last put it. Flipping open the lid of one of the wooden chests, he carefully pulled out the weapon before strapping it to his back. Without staying any longer than he needed to, he left the storage cell. He placed his key back in his pocket, knowing that he would probably return for some other things later. But the weapon on his back was the only thing that he needed right now. Cold brushed at his fingertips, startling him for a moment, before remembering the other key the Hokage had given him. It looked pretty much like any other key he had owned, perhaps a little more tarnished and rusty than most, but nothing special, 2 numbers engraved at the very bottom. 21. Meaning Vault 21. The vault at the end of the next corridor. Slinging the key back into his pocket, he began to walk down the corridor, trying to remember which of the doors led onto the next hallway over, failing miserably in the process. Upgrading energy-efficient doors and windows. His mind wandered, drifting back to the night before. Each of the genin had really shown their colors. Kensuke had been very defensive, keeping an eye out for his teammates. Sasuke had been the opposite, leaving his other 2 teammates to fend for themselves while he went off on his own, and Sakura hadn't actually done anything. But nobody seemed to take her seriously enough to take the time to teach her anything worthwhile. Yet she had seen when a move that had left Sasuke's side unguarded for a second, which had really confused him, throwing his whole opinion of her out of the window, and all he could do was watch it hit the pavement. He sighed. The door he was looking for, Vault 21, was visible now, at the very end of the corridor. Almost there at least. Retrieving the key cautiously from his pocket, he turned it over a couple of times, only wondering now what could be on the other side of the door. Better now than never. This door gave him more trouble than he expected, having rusted shut. It must have been a while since the door had last been opened, but a well-placed kicked and it opened far enough to let him squeeze in. The room was almost empty, all the surfaces covered in a thick layer of dust, his footfalls disturbing the stillness of the room. The only contents of the room, a small case. Flipping the catches open, he threw the lid open, and he stared, not moving for several seconds, not sure whether he should be grateful or annoyed. The case was lined with 3-pronged kunai, each hilt covered with a paper seal. The Flying Thunder God technique. Hiraishin no Jutsu. The only technique he had been prohibited from learning. You're late, Kakashi said monotonously, his eye never once glancing from the pages of Icha Icha, broken every so often when he moved to flick over the next page. The 3 genin looked a little tired, and Kakashi noticed Sasuke was favoring his left leg ever so slightly, but just enough to notice it when he walked. What had Naruto done to them? Have fun last night? The jounin asked, his voice monotonous once more, but a small smile was on his lips. Well, Kitsune was interesting, Sakura said hesitantly, when neither of the 2 boys answered for her. Interesting, eh? Kakashi laughed. Only in his head though. It seems Kitsune has gotten a little melodramatic in his old age. And what happened to Sasuke-kun? He asked, thoroughly enjoying the torture he was inflicting upon his students. What can I say? Naruto had to get his attitude from somewhere. Sasuke directed a famous Ucha scowl at the silver-haired sensei, to which said sensei smiled, his eyes crinkling upwards. Lost. Sasuke finished, his scowl deepening further still. He was going to be the next Hokage. Kakashi shut the book with a snap, causing Kensuke and Sakura to jump, I would have hardly expected you to win. But Kakashi cut the Ucha off with a wave of his hand. Ma, no buts about it. The Ucha dropped his gaze back to the floor. And what about you two? The silver-haired interrogator asked, gaze flicking between the two other members of his team. Kensuke frowned. Was he always like that, sensei? Like what? So. The blonde trailed off, not finding any way to express what he was feeling. Kakashi suddenly looked serious, surprising the three children, and turned away from them, facing back towards the center of Konoha. I suppose you're all well enough to train, but we can do that later. It's midday already. Perhaps we can go find Naruto for lunch. I'm sure he'd love to hear about Kitsune. What? It's lunchtime? The three genin yelled in almost practiced unison. Sakura smiled. I guess we were all pretty out of it. Heh. They hurried after their rapidly retreating sensei. Slide step, turn, block, strike, turn, strike, drop, strike, turn back. Naruto wiped the sweat from his forehead, the sun burning his exposed back as he stood in the middle of a vacant training ground, his katana held loosely in his hand. He might be completely exhausted, but there was still a smile on his face and a sense of achievement. It was then that his stomach rumbled, and he decided that Ichiraku's was nice enough to eat for both breakfast and lunch. Strapping the blade to his back, he began to walk towards Konoha, taking his own sweet time. Look! Kensuke pointed, the frown replaced by his sunny smile at Shika and Kiba's teams. Almost all the seats were filled, and Team 7 had to squeeze in on the last 4 seats at the counter to place their orders. Let's just say the Ucha was not impressed being crushed either side by both Kensuke and Kiba. So Shika! Kensuke yelled, once again arms windmilling wildly. What you been up to? Watching clouds. And? No, that's about it. Kensuke frowned. But you have to have done something. Nope. The lazy slacker grinned, too troublesome. Right. The frown suddenly disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Chuji. Me. The Akamichi shoveled more food into his mouth. Not much. I know. Kensuke didn't really like the blonde-haired Yamanaka, but he didn't want her to feel left out. Me? Working at the shop. She tossed her platinum blonde hair over her shoulder, but nothing exciting really. Kensuke smiled. It had probably been the first time that the girl hadn't shouted at him or told him to go away when he asked her a question, and he turned to Team 8. Tucci smiled at the young genin sat at the counter, recognizing Team 7 as Naruto's friends from before. Talking of the blonde, he wasn't there. Tucci-san. Kakashi waved a greeting, eyes creasing in a smile nobody could see. Kakashi-san. The ramen stall owner nodded back to the silver-haired jounin. Has Naruto-kun been here yet? He was here this morning and he seemed pretty annoyed, kept muttering about how senpai would pay for the lack of ramen. Kakashi gulped. Naruto wouldn't get so worked up over ramen, would he? Would he? Kakashi resigned himself to his imminent demise. Did he say where he was going? He said something about going to see Hokage-sama. The stall owner shrugged, but he didn't say much about it. The jounin sighed. Perhaps they wouldn't be joining Naruto for lunch. Finally. Naruto grinned. It had taken what felt like forever to get from the training ground all the way to Ichiraku's, and at last, he had finally arrived. He winced as his stomach rumbled painfully, reminding him of how hungry he actually was. Ichiraku's, here I come. Q and A's asterisk, insert them, tune here asterisk. Chappie 8 questions. Why is it bad to train with Koge Bunshins? From Arch Zell. It's not bad, but Tora's laughing at him for using them, because he could have remembered and relearnt everything via his old memories, rather than waste time and chakra on Bunshins. Does that explain everything? Gomen, if it's confusing. Has it not occurred to you to use something besides Kitsune as a code name? This is Tsuchiya to the 100th degree from Blood of Seraphim. I could call him Frank or Killer Bunny of the Apocalypse. It just doesn't have the same ring to it. I used Kitsune because it's cliché, and everybody knows who I'm on about. At least asterisk shifty eyes asterisk, I hope you do. You really should have picked some other reason for Naruto to quit. Intelligence is never 100% accurate in anything. By Wind Kinomoto. Wahaha. This shall be explained in later chappies. Do the words twist and plot mean anything to YA? He. I think you're overestimating how long 2 years is. From Lord Ezreal. Well, he forces himself to forget things. It can actually happen to people, like FRCED amnesia. But I suppose I did kinda exaggerate. But it gives me chapter fuel. Asterisk, this is kinda where it starts on chapter 9 asterisk. He didn't go to Shinomori that night? From BS Up, your name's too long, smiley face. It was the night after, since when Kashi tells them about it. It's 2 days before the full moon. So he trains that evening until the early morning, sleeps, gets everything together and then goes and babysits the genin. Gomen, if I didn't make it clear enough. Sometimes I forget people can't read my mind. Sakura's kinda annoying. From Yokura. Yup, she is. That was on purpose though. I don't actually hate her. So it's just her being in character. Why was that Oto guy there? From Archzel. What happens during the Chunin exams? Wink with tongue sticking out. I wonder if some sense was knocked into Sasuke? From Pirate Penguin. It's Sasuke. You would need to run him over with a space shuttle to knock anything into him. Good thing Kitsune owns a space shuttle, eh? I think that's all the questions, and things that needed answering. If you're wondering why I don't answer every obdi directly, it's because I know some people don't ask the questions or they're too embarrassed to ask. So I write them here, so if there's something someone doesn't understand, it might be answered here. Anything you don't understand, please feel free to ask. Asterisk Tora pops out of nowhere again asterisk. You're my honey bunch, sugar plum pumpkin. You're my sweetie pie. You're my cupcake, gumdrop snoogums boogums. You're the apple of my eye. And I love you so, and I want you to know that I'll always be right here. And I love to sing sweet songs to you, because you are so dear. Hope you guys enjoy first part of this fanfic. Do like, share and subscribe and comment down for second part.